I stood by your Atlantic Sea and sang a song for Ireland.
Welcome to Keystone University. Today we're going to learn all about Atlantis Ireland. You're going to learn that the legend of Atlantis, an island of advanced seafaring people in the Atlantic Ocean, is mostly true. It combines two related places into one legend, a lot of exaggeration and some historical errors. The island of Ireland is the legendary lost island of Atlantis. Ireland matches the description of the island that Plato described, while Newgrange, in Ireland's Boyne Valley, is the circular temple of Atlantis, and is probably the oldest temple on earth. The Irish were the first people in the world to develop an advanced civilization. They were the first to develop boats, fishing, agriculture, construction, metalwork, language, mathematics, sports, music, philosophy, and astronomy. They sailed the world, giving the gift of civilization to others, not to build an empire, but to push the human race forward. The ancient Irish built stone circles, mounds, cairns, and dolmens all over the world. Stone Age constructions are found in virtually every country on earth. The most spectacular are found in Ireland's Boyne Valley. The island of Ireland has an estimated 100,000 Stone Age constructions. The Irish tree alphabet Ogham was the world's first written language, while the spoken Gaelic language is the missing Indo-European mother tongue that scholars have sought for centuries. The Old Irish Gaelic language is the root of the world's languages. The stereotypical Irish genetics of red hair and milky white skin are found all over the world in the most unlikeliest of places. Many Egyptian pharaohs are from the same genetic gene pool as the Irish, while the legends of an advanced red-haired, sunburnt race are found all across the globe. In Greek mythology, Atlas was the first king of the island of Atlantis. He was also the first king of Mauritania, and the Atlas Mountains in North Africa were named after him. The lost city of Atlantis that Plato described was actually an early Irish settlement called Cairn in Mauritania, Africa, near the Atlas Mountains. It was the Amazons from Libya and not the Atlantean Irish that waged war in the Mediterranean. Atlantis Ireland and much of the world was devastated by a huge global flood 11,600 years ago, which was triggered by a comet impact in the Atlantic near the Puerto Rico Trench. Very few survived. There are 3 rules to the game to learn from Keystone University. Number 1, don't believe a word we say. Think for yourself. Do your own research. Most of all, do your own thinking. The point of an education is not to tell you what to think, it's to help you think for yourself. Number 2, before you make up your mind, open it. The very nature of our work means that we push the boundaries and we go against mainstream opinion. We don't ask you to believe a word we say, just think for yourself and approach our work with an open mind. And number 3, wait for the mainstream science to catch up. We push the boundaries, and the very nature of our work goes against mainstream opinion. If you want mainstream opinion, there are plenty of other universities to go to. If, however, you want the absolute cutting edge, you come to Keystone. Our mission is to build the world's best university, a centre of excellence that pushes the human race forward. We want to build the best university the world has ever seen, and we hope you're a part of that. For more information, visit keystone.ie. We run 3 separate 3-day seminars: Atlantis, Mastermind, and Enterprise. Keystone's material is light years ahead of the competition and is not available anywhere else on the planet. Our Atlantis seminar helps you explore the great mysteries. Day 1 is all about the real ancient history of the world. Day 2, we explore modern science and all the great breakthroughs. Day 3 is all about human evolution, where we came from, where we're going, and why we're here. That programme is run once a year in Dublin, Ireland, every May. Our second seminar is called Mastermind, where we help you awaken the genius within. Day one is all about mind mechanics. It's about helping you understand the origin of fear, stress, overwhelm, and anxiety. Day two is all about creative thinking, how to unlock your inner wisdom. And day three is all about creating an inspired mission for your life. The mind is like a computer, and inspiration is like broadband. That program is run every August in Dublin, Ireland. Our final program is Enterprise, where we help you master the art of business. Enterprise is like a 3-day MBA and is the best business education on the planet. Day one is all about rapid growth. How do you rapidly grow a business? Day two is about financial mastery, how to multiply the sales, profit, cash flow, and the value of any business. And day three is all about mastering people skills, recruitment, management, and leadership. To buy tickets to any of our seminars or to find out how you can help build the world's best university, visit keystone.ie. Now let's get down to work. Part 1, the island of Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis originated with the Greek philosopher and historian Plato. Plato told us that beyond the Pillars of Heracles there is an island, the island of Atlantis. Several decades later, as Greek knowledge developed, Aristotle told us that beyond the Pillars of Heracles there is actually 2 islands, Albion, which is Britain, the White Island, and Erne, which is Ireland, the Sacred Island, and that both islands are beyond the Celts, which is France. Sometime later, Greek historian Diodorus, who was known as the father of history, told us that Marina first attacked the Atlanteans in the city of Cairn, and that when she took the city, she killed all the adult males, enslaved the women and children, and razed the city. Now, if we take a quick look at this map was created based on the Greek knowledge at the time. Here we can clearly see Britain, Atlantis Ireland, the Isle of Man, the Greek understanding of Europe, so this is France and Spain. Here's Iberia, Spain. Here we've got the Pillars of Heracles, which is the Straits of Gibraltar. Here we've got Africa, this is Ethiopia. Here is the Atlas Mountains in Mauritania, and here is the city of Cairn in Mauritania. There are many legends linking ancient Ireland and ancient Mauritania. This is the Greek understanding of the island of Atlantis. It's Ireland. This is the location of the city of Cairn in Mauritania, also known as the Ricard structure. This is the city of Atlantis. Now, the island of Atlantis, the Atlantic or the Atlantis Ocean, and the Atlas Mountains were all named after the Greek titan Atlas. Atlas was the first king of Atlantis, and he was also the first king of Mauritania. Plato's legend of Atlantis combined 2 separate places, the island of Atlantis, Ireland, and the city of Cairn in Mauritania, Africa. Let's examine the evidence for Atlantis, Ireland. Plato's Atlantis was a large island in the Atlantic Ocean with a central plain that was surrounded by mountains. Ireland is the only large island on Earth that is remotely close to this description. There are also many details in Plato's description that fit like a glove, such as the steep cliffs on one coast, gentler slopes on the other coast, a fertile central plain that has a view to the sea while being encircled by mountains. Also, Plato never once described Atlantis as being a continent. He described it as an island in the Atlantic. Ireland was the island of Atlantis that Plato described. Scientists are certain that while a small island could sink, a large landmass could not have sunk to the bottom of the ocean. 11,600 years ago, Atlantis Ireland was drowned by a tsunami and few survived. So Atlantis did not sink to the bottom of the ocean. Plato told us Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. He was describing a tsunami. There were very few survivors on Ireland, although there were some. Irish mythology and the Irish annals tell us about life in Ireland before the Great Flood and after the Great Flood. Ireland is the only country on earth with legends of life before and after the Great Flood. Plato also described the hot and cold springs of Atlantis. Ireland has 27 known warm springs, which are called thermal springs, mostly in the Boyne Valley region. There are also thousands of cold springs all across Ireland, which are known as holy wells. Plato also described an island with elephants. While Ireland had mammoths, it never had elephants. Plato's legend actually combined two related places, as we've already learned: the island of Atlantis, Ireland, and the Irish settlement of Cairn in Mauritania, Africa. At one time, Mauritania was a very fertile land with thousands of elephants and millions of acres of farmland. In Greek mythology, Atlas was the first king of both the island of Atlantis and Mauritania in Africa. So clearly Plato combined two legends into one. Ireland has a very temperate climate due to the Atlantic Gulf Stream. This warm ocean current did not stop during the Great Ice Age or the Younger Dryas Mini Ice Age period. As a result, Ireland was habitable from ancient times. Flint stone tools have been found in Ireland dating back at least 300,000 to 400,000 years, and it's most likely that Ireland has been occupied for hundreds of thousands of years. Plato mentioned that Atlantis could produce 2 crops per year. Barley is harvested in Ireland twice a year, as are grass crops. In fact, some grass crops are harvested 3 times per year in Ireland. Ireland has winter and spring barley. Winter barley is planted in the autumn of the winter time. It grows very slowly over the winter, but it springs to life in the springtime and is harvested in the summer. Ireland also has spring barley, which is planted in the spring, and it grows spring and summer and is harvested in the autumn. So Ireland is that fertile that barley is harvested in the summer and the autumn, and that is the 2 crops per year that Plato described. Plato told us in the centre was a fertile plain which was surrounded by mountains. Here we can see the fertile plain clearly surrounded by mountains. There is also extremely good land in Ireland in the north in Ulster and down here in Munster as well. But here we can see mountains surrounding a fertile plain. This is the region of the Boyne Valley, which was the ancient capital of Old Ireland. Plato also told us that the circumference of the central plain was 10,000 stadia, which is about 1,660 kilometres. The circumference of this plain is close to that. It's a little smaller, but it is close to that. The whole country was described as being very lofty and precipitous on the side of the sea, but the country immediately about and surrounding the city was of a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains which descended toward the sea. It was smooth and even and of an oblong shape, extending in one direction 3,000 stadia, but across the centre inland it was 2,000 stadia. A stadia is 166 metres, which is 200 old megalithic yards, and a megalithic yard is 0.829 metres. If you multiply 3,000 by 2,000, you get 6 million stadia squared. If you multiply the measurements of Ireland, which is 2932 in this direction and 2038 in this direction, you get 5.975. That's within 1%, actually less than half of 1% of Plato's measurements. Now, there are a couple of points we would like to make on this particular piece of evidence. Some people think that the measurements 3,000 by 2,000 are for the plain of Atlantis, while others think it's for the island of Atlantis. We are of the opinion that the measurements provided is for the island of Atlantis and not the central plain. However, you can very easily argue that it's for the plain, just as you could argue that the measurements are complete nonsense. Secondly, these measurements are taken from the furthest points, which is how land used to be measured, and in fact is still measured in many places. Taking a measurement from north, south, east and west is one way of doing it, But at the time, and up until quite recently in history, land was measured from the furthest points. Now, the prevailing academic opinion that Plato made up the legend of Atlantis as some sort of moral tale is complete nonsense. There is no moral to the story of Atlantis. Everybody died in that story. There is no moral there. In Plato's Republic, a completely separate book which never mentioned Atlantis, he speaks at length about the perfect society and how he would design the perfect society, which was absolutely nothing to do with Atlantis. We can understand why people have rubbished the legend of Atlantis due to some of the very wild and wonderful theories that have been associated with it, but like all mythology, there is a grain of truth surrounded by a lot of exaggeration, and we are here today to separate fact from fiction. Let's translate some of Plato's words. Beyond the Pillars of Heracles there lay an island. Translation: there is an island in the Atlantic Ocean past the Straits of Gibraltar. Measuring 3,000 stadia long and 2,000 stadia wide, we've just covered this. The island of Ireland measures 2932 by 2038 stadia at its furthest points, putting it within 1% of Plato's measurements of Atlantis. And as we've just pointed out, some people think those dimensions are for the island of Atlantis, other people think those measurements are for the fertile central plain, and other people think those measurements are just gibberish. We're of the opinion they're the measurements of the island, but do your own thinking. Plato told us that the kings of the island of Atlantis once had an extent larger than Libya and Asia put together. So what he's telling us is the scale or the reach of the kings of Atlantis was global, bigger than all of Africa and Asia combined. Not that the island was bigger than Africa and Asia combined, but that the reach or the scale of Atlantis was. He told us that Atlantis was the way to other islands, and from those islands you can pass to the whole opposite continent. What he was telling us was the island of Atlantis Ireland was a stepping stone to sail to Iceland, then Greenland, and then on to the opposite continent of America. Interestingly, Plato knew about America over 2,000 years before Columbus supposedly discovered it. In the centre of Atlantis was a plain surrounded by mountains, which is said to have been the fairest of all plains and very fertile. And as you have just seen, in the centre of Ireland is one of the most fertile plains on earth, which is surrounded by beautiful mountains. Having researched the 50 largest islands on earth, Ireland is the only one with a central plain surrounded by mountains. Obviously, it's in the Atlantic Ocean, just as Plato described, and the central plain in Ireland is extremely fertile. It is amongst the best agricultural land anywhere in the world. Plato told us Atlantis Ireland, was the way to other islands. When the Irish sailed the world thousands of years ago, they sailed close to land. So initially they would have sailed around Ireland's rivers and then Ireland's outlying islands, and then over to Scotland and Wales, Cornwall and England, France and Spain, etc. When they were going across the Atlantic, they sailed to Iceland. That's a 5 to 7 day sail in a puck-on boat, which we'll learn about later. It's another 5 to 7 days to Greenland, but after 14 days of sailing, you can now sail the entire world without straying too far from land, which is the smart way to do it. That's also how thousands of years later the Vikings sailed. They sailed from land to land rather than across large seas and oceans, which is very dangerous, much safer to stay closer to land. Whenever Columbus found America thousands of years later, he sailed directly across the ocean and the voyage is supposed to have taken 6 weeks. However, by sailing from Ireland using this route, it also takes about 6 weeks to make the same journey, but it's much safer and you need a lot less supplies to make the journey. So that's how they did it. Having studied the 50 largest islands on Earth, there is only one that has a central plain surrounded by mountains: Ireland. Ireland is also an island in the Atlantic Ocean, just like Plato described. The exact location of Atlantis that Plato gave us was in front of the Straits of Gibraltar, which would be here, and Ireland is here. That's pretty close. And bearing in mind the Greek knowledge of geography wasn't as developed as our current knowledge is today. It should also be pointed out that the legend of Atlantis was given to Plato by someone who got it from someone else, who got it from someone else, who got it from someone else, who got it from a priest in Egypt, telling him about something that happened 9,000 years previously. It's astonishing it was as accurate as it is. In Atlantis we find a circular temple to Poseidon with a strange barbaric appearance that measures half a stadia wide. This is a reference to Newgrange in Ireland's Boyne Valley, which measures half a stadia in diameter and is probably the world's oldest temple. Now, half a stadia is 83 metres. Newgrange is 84 or 85 metres, depending on which measurement you use. Plato spoke about the capital being 50 stadia from the sea. The Boyne Valley was the ancient capital of Ireland and is 50 stadia from the sea, which is 8.3 kilometres. And as we pointed out earlier, a stadia is 166 metres. Plato told us that 9,000 years before the time of Solon, in a great disaster, Atlantis was utterly destroyed by water, or it was swallowed by the sea, or it was drowned. He used different words. So 9,000 years before the time of Solon is 11,600 years before present. And this is the end of the Younger Dryas, or the mini Ice Age period. So the date that Plato gave us has been independently found by scientists and geologists as a time of extreme climate change on Earth, which we will speak about later. Plato spoke of a great disaster. Disaster is a Greek word which means bad or evil star, such as a comet striking Earth. If you break down the word disaster, it's disaster. Bad or evil star. Before Atlantis was utterly destroyed by water, swallowed by the sea, or drowned. Before Atlantis Ireland was drowned by a large tsunami, floods, and ocean earthquakes, all triggered by a huge comet impact. The comet struck the Atlantic Ocean near the Puerto Rico Trench. Later on, we will show you the exact location of the impact. This is a picture of Newgrange, the circular temple to Poseidon that Plato described with a strange barbaric appearance, measuring half a stadia wide. This is probably the oldest temple on Earth. It's aligned to the sun, it's also aligned to the moon and the stars. And the level of astronomical alignment in this building is truly incredible. Ireland benefited from the warm Atlantic Gulf Stream during the Ice Age. This is important because Ireland is occupied by humans much longer than the mainstream currently accept. And like a lot of our work, we simply have to wait for the science to catch up. So here's the important things to note. The Gulf Stream is like the plumbing system of Earth, and the warm Atlantic Gulf Stream washed Ireland's shores throughout the Ice Age. Now, there is no doubt that parts of Ireland at some stage over the last 2 or 3 million years had large ice fields. Some and possibly all of the island were under ice. But the point here is that Ireland's ice melted much earlier than people realise. The flora and fauna of Ireland has unique genetics not found in Britain or anywhere else in the world, and these genetics are much older than the comparable ones from Britain, indicating that Ireland has been occupied by animals for much longer than people realised. Flint tools have been found in Ireland in 3 separate independent locations. These tools are dated back at least 300,000 to 400,000 years, and there is no good reason to suspect that Ireland has not been occupied since then. The current academic theory that these tools were dumped off in Ireland by a glacier is ridiculous. They're man-made tools used by men and women in Ireland 300,000 or 400,000 years ago. And Ireland has been occupied ever since, even during the Younger Dryas or Mini Ice Age period. Ireland has been occupied for hundreds of thousands of years, possibly 1 million years. When you study the Ice Age and the Younger Dryas period, you realise that Ireland was inhabited by humans much, much longer than people realise. Also, in the Younger Dryas period, which was known as the Mini Ice Age, which ended 11,600 years ago, right in the middle of that period, they have found bare bones that were butchered by man-made tools. So right in the middle of the coldest period in the last 20,000 years, the Irish were hunting and eating bears. That'll tell you how advanced they were. The dates associated with Newgrange and Ireland's monuments are not reliable. It makes more sense to add a 0 to each one of them. Ireland is occupied so much longer than people realise, and every year the dates keep getting pushed back. The Greeks called Ireland Ern, which means the sacred isle. It's derived from the Greek words Erios and Nisos, meaning sacred island. Aristotle told us that in the ocean beyond the Pillars of Heracles are two islands. Albion, Britain, the White Island. Britain was called the White Island because of the white cliffs of Dover. The ancient Irish also called it the White Island. And Ern, the sacred island, Ireland, beyond the Celtic, which was France. Now, by the way, the Irish were not Celts. They were Gaels. The Celts were the descendants of the Gaels. Greek mythology also describes a race of giants called the Hyperboreans, who live on an island, which was Ireland, beyond the land of the Gaul, which is France. This island is both fertile and productive of every crop and has an unusually temperate climate, priests with harps, and a magnificent circular temple, which is Newgrange. Roman writers referred to Ireland as Insula Sacra, the sacred isle, the island of saints, or the island of the learned, hence the modern day description of Ireland being the land of saints and scholars. Now, the Romans didn't hold much sacred, but they described Ireland as sacred. When something is described in history as sacred, it gets that description because it dates back to the most ancient of times. The Spectrum Regale, also known as the King's Mirror from Norway, referred to the sacred soil of Ireland and how no serpent could survive there. Interestingly, Ireland does not have snakes. Britain does, France does, the rest of the world does. Ireland doesn't. Ireland is sometimes referred to as the island of the setting sun. When we move to the east of the world, into Asia, we find that the Hindu people in the ancient Sanskrit texts mention the ancient history of Ireland and its sacred ground. Ireland has been described as Suvarnadvip, the golden island. It also means beautiful, most beautiful, excellent, and has been translated as the happy island. The word Suvarnia is developed from Suvarnadvip. From the earliest periods, the Hindus considered Suvarnia the abode of the Pitris, the fathers or the Manu, the first men. We are told in the Sanskrit text that the first men were obliged to leave their favourite abode, but we are not told why. At one time, both Ireland and Scotland were called Scotia. The name of Scotland is derived from the Latin word Scotia, which means land of the Gaels. The links between the Irish and the Scots go back to the most ancient of times. The Gaelic language and culture originated in Ireland and was spoken across Scotland. The European Celts were the descendants of the Irish Gaels. Ireland has had many names throughout history. Ern, Ernie, Hibernia, Erin, Era, Scotia, the land of the setting sun, the land of the flame, the land of saints and scholars, the land of giants, and the Emerald Isle. We can now add another name to that list: Atlantis. In these two photographs, we've got the cliffs of Moher on the west coast of Ireland, and we've got one of Ireland's dolmens. The cliffs of Moher are spectacular steep cliffs on the west of Ireland, just like Plato described on one side of the island. That's the cliffs of Moher. If the ancient Irish really did sail the world, we would expect to find their genetics all over the globe, and we do. The stereotypical Irish genetics of red hair, blue eyes, and milky white skin is the rarest genetic combination on Earth. Less than 1 million people on the planet. That's 0.0001% of the entire human population have these genetics. Red hair, which ranges from strawberry blonde to fair to fiery red to auburn, is thought to have first appeared around 40 or 50,000 years ago. And blue eyes are thought to have originated around 10 or 15,000 years ago, with one single ancestor, an Adam or an Eve type character. Anywhere we find pockets of redheads, we find descendants of the ancient Irish. Unsurprisingly, Ireland has the highest concentration of red-haired genetics anywhere in the world. The direct historical descendants of the ancient Irish include the Phoenicians, the Hebrews, and the Indo-European Aryans. The word Aryan means from Aaron. Aaron is Ireland's ancient name. The term Aryan was hijacked by the Nazis and several others, but the true meaning is Aryan means from Aaron. Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, often said to have been the greatest of all pharaohs, had reddish fair hair. At least 6 other pharaohs are known to have red, fair, or auburn hair, while even the legendary Cleopatra is depicted as having red hair. Tutankhamun's genetic profile, which is RM269, is found in the highest concentration in Ireland. The Irish are part of the same genetic group as the lineage of the pharaohs. Thousands of blonde and red-haired mummies have been found all across Egypt. Red-haired mummies have also been found all over the world, including in New Zealand, China, Peru, and Alaska, and several other places. There are also numerous legends from around the world of a highly advanced race of bearded, sunburnt redheads. There are also numerous legends of an early race of red-haired giants between 8 and 12 foot tall. Both red hair and blue eyes are recessive traits. In order to display them, you must get the genes from both of your parents. Interestingly, there are some other things like blood groups and rhesus negative blood that is also related to Irish genetics, which we're not going to go into today. Ultimately, the theory of Atlantis Ireland rests on one simple fact: the Irish invented boats before anybody else. The ancient Irish invented boats and sailed from the earliest of times. Having mastered sailing on Ireland's rivers, they first sailed to Ireland's outlying islands such as the Aran Islands, Tory Island, Rathlin Island, Bull Island, Skellig Michael, and several other islands, before sailing the short distance of 19 kilometres to Scotland, before eventually sailing the world. This top image is of a boyne currach, the oldest boat on Earth. The boyne currach was used in Ireland since the Stone Age and is the oldest boat on Earth. It's also known as a coracle. Similar boats are used by native people all over the world. The boyne currach developed into a range of different river and sea currach boats which are capable of longer distances, and many are still used today. The currach also evolved into a range of much larger boats, including the pecan, which is also known as the Galway hooker boat, which is virtually identical to the Arab dhow boat. The pecan is capable of sailing the world and carrying significant cargo. There are many names for boats in Ireland, including the pecan, Galway hooker, Bodmore, and several others. Sailing around Ireland's 3,171 kilometre coastline was the perfect training for global voyages. If you could sail around Ireland, you could sail the world. The Irish sailed from island to island rather than directly across the oceans. As an island nation in the Atlantic Ocean, it was natural that sailing was first developed in Ireland, who has a very, very long history of sailing and boat building. In more recent times, the Titanic, the most famous ship of all time, was built in Belfast. Ireland's ancient annals contain numerous legends of voyages to the four corners of the world from the earliest of times. The Phoenician sea merchants were Irish settlers who built scores of cities in the Mediterranean and North Africa. When the Egyptian pharaohs first took to the high seas, they hired the best of the best, the Phoenician Irish. So here's some old footage of a curragh being made. These boats were also called basket boats. There we can see the cowhide that made the boat waterproof. And here we see the weaving. And there he is. These boats were used for fishing and sailing along the river since the Stone Age. These boats evolved into a sea version. This was much larger. And this would have been the first large-scale boat in the world. It's made using the exact same techniques, weaving and animal hide, and this one also has a sail. It evolved into the Buchan, the Galway hooker, or the Bod Mor, spectacular boats. These boats are the origin of the Arab dhow boat and are capable of holding significant cargo. With these boats, the ancient Irish mastered the high seas. The ancient Irish were the world's first builders and stonemasons. They were the first race to develop construction and architecture. They built Stone Age constructions such as standing stone circles, mounds, cairns and dolmens all over the world. Stone circles have now been found in virtually every country on earth, proving that the entire world, not just Ireland, has a spectacular ancient history. Standing stones have been found all across Europe, the Americas, Asia and Africa. We have listed some of the countries there, although the list is virtually every country on earth. The top picture is just a normal set of standing stones in County Clare. The bottom picture is from the Nabta Playa stone circle in Egypt, which was the birthplace of Egyptian civilization. The ancients were masters of magnetism, and many stone circles have peculiar magnetic properties. There are many theories as to what the stone circles were used for. They were multi-purpose constructions. One of their uses was healing. They were also used for astronomy, as gathering places, to decree laws, and there were several other uses. Now let's look at the mound builders. There are thousands of mounds all across Ireland. They're usually called fairy forts. The most spectacular are found in the Boyne Valley. An astonishing 200,000 tonnes of earth and stone was moved to build the Newgrange Mound alone. America has an incredible ancient history that most of her people are completely unaware of. There are hundreds of mounds all over the Americas from the most ancient of times. The Native American people have countless stories and legend of a giant race of men who built these huge mounds. A New York Times article from 1897 described a mound in Wisconsin in which a giant human skeleton measuring over 9 foot was found. In 1886, another New York Times article described water receding from a mound in Cartersville, Georgia, which uncovered acres of skulls and bones, some of which were said to have been gigantic. 2 thigh bones were measured with the height of their owner estimated at 14 foot. President Abraham Lincoln made reference to the giants whose bones filled the mounds of America. He said that the eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones filled the mounds of America, have gazed on the Niagara Falls as ours do now. Mounds are also known as tumulus and are found across Britain, Europe, Asia, Africa and America. If we take a look at this top image, this is typical mounds found in America. The bottom image is in Noath in Ireland's Boyne Valley. The mounds are virtually identical because it was the same people who built them. Cairn is an old Irish word which means stacked or piled rocks. Cairns are found all across the world and were used as burial sites or as landmarks. Cairns are also found in North America and are associated with the Native American people. In one example, they mark a game driving lane called the Buffalo Jumps, which may date back to at least 12,000 years ago. So the Buffalo Jumps, what they did there was they marked the lane that they were driving wild buffaloes with cairns, with stacked stones. And essentially what they did was they drove the buffaloes across a cliff. Obviously the poor buffaloes fell to their death, and it provided the tribe with meat. So cairns have been used for that type of thing all around the world. Cairns are also used as landmarks and signposts, cists or burial chambers. And Inuski is a form of stacked rocks used as a landmark and found all over the Arctic region of Canada, Greenland and Alaska. So the bottom picture there is the stacked rock version of a cairn, and the top picture is a more elaborate piled rocks. The ancient African city of Cairn in Mauritania derived its name from the Irish word cairn. Cairn was Plato's lost city of Atlantis. Mauritania had a huge Stone Age population and was thought to be the birthplace of civilization in Africa. The Fertile Crescent region in the Middle East also had a huge quantity of cairns, dolmens and stone circles from ancient times. At one time, both areas had very fertile lands, Mauritania and the Fertile Crescent. There are many legends linking the ancient Irish to both Mauritania and the Middle East. In the mythology of ancient Greece, cairns were associated with Hermes, the Greek god of wisdom and son of Zeus. Hermes was a grandson of Atlas, after whom the Greeks named the island of Atlantis, the city of Atlantis, the Atlantic Ocean, the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, and the Atlanteans, the descendants of Atlantis. Some consider the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, who was the Egyptian god of wisdom, to be interchangeable. Thoth, of course, was one of the founders of Egyptian civilization. The word dolmen means stone table. Dolmens are also called portal or passage tombs. There are 190 known dolmens across Ireland and many more that are unaccounted for or have yet to be discovered. Dolmens are also found across the world in Britain, France, Germany, Holland, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Bulgaria, Russia, Asia, America and Africa. The largest dolmen in North America at North Salem has a capstone estimated to weigh an incredible 90 tons. There are thousands of dolmens in Asia, especially in India and Korea. The largest of concentration dolmens in the world is found in North and South Korea, where an estimated 35,000 dolmens are found. Some Korean dolmens depict astronomical formations and are dated to around 3000 BC. The people of North and South Korea have an incredible shared history, as do the people of Palestine, Israel, Syria, Iran, Iraq and Jordan, who have an ancient Stone Age shared history, as in fact does the entire world. In the Basque country, dolmens are attributed to a race of giants. Dolmens are also attributed to a race of giants in many legends from ancient Germany. Old writings claim that Mauritania, Africa was a great centre of Stone Age culture with as many as 10,000 Stone Age constructions including dolmens, cairns, stone circles and mounds in the form of step pyramids. This top image is a dolmen in Korea. The bottom image is a dolmen in Ireland. Ireland has an estimated 50,000 ring forts. Many have concentric rings of land and water and with the base of chieftains and royalty. Secret underground escape passages called souterrains ran from many of Ireland's ring forts. Interestingly, the escape passages are 3, 4, 5 foot tall, which indicates a small race. A race, if you like, of dwarves or hobbits. In the Irish language, forts are known by a number of names including Rath, Doon and Cashel, and are the origin of many Irish town names. In Ireland, they are also known as fairy forts, or the home of the little people. The little people are sometimes called the She. The modern English word castle is derived from the ancient Irish word cashale. Spectacular ring forts are also found in Britain, particularly in Cornwall, where the ancient Irish traded tin. Hill forts are a version of ring fort that are found on hilltops or cliff edges. Forts are found across Britain, Europe, Scandinavia and Russia. More than 450 huge earthworks have been discovered in Brazil, including several circular ring forts. This bottom picture is a circular ring fort found in the Amazon in Brazil. The top picture is a circular ring fort found in County Roscommon. Interestingly, it's got 3 concentric circles of land, and at one time it would have had water in those moats. That is not the city of Atlantis Plato described, but interestingly, it does have 3 concentric circles of land and water. Crannogs are circular forts built on artificial islands in lakes and rivers. The builders constructed artificial islands for protection, as it was a lot easier to defend. The word crannog literally means young tree, derived from the Irish word cran for tree and og for young. Ireland has an estimated 1,200 crannogs, while Scotland has around 500. There is also a handful in Wales. They are not believed to be found anywhere else in the world. Some Scottish crannogs are older than Stonehenge. Crannogs consist of circular hut buildings, as did most Irish ring forts. The only difference between a crannog and a ring fort is a crannog is surrounded by water. But the same circular huts were used whether a fort was built on water or on land. Similar circular buildings are found among indigenous people all over the world. Some are built on stilts rather than man-made islands, while most are built on land using virtually identical construction techniques. Many South American tribes still construct very similar structures, such as these huts from Colombia. As you can see, the huts in the crannog and the South American tribes are almost identical. Crannogs are not thought to exist anywhere else in the world other than Ireland, Scotland, and a handful in Wales. But the construction technique of circular buildings is found all over the world. Most South American tribes contain legends of red-haired or fair-haired, sunburnt, and usually bearded people arriving in boats and teaching them farming and construction. Henges are found across Ireland and Britain. Dronehenge is a nickname given to a huge monument discovered in 2018 with a 200-metre diameter, making it the largest known henge on Earth. This henge has not yet been excavated. There was also an enormous circular henge at Carnbeg, Dundalk, County Louth, which was destroyed sometime in the 1800s, and there are many records and drawings of this henge in old Irish books. Stonehenge in Wiltshire, England is a spectacular henge and one of the most famous historical sites on earth. Gerald of Wales wrote that Merlin took the large stones to England from the plains of Kildare, Ireland. He also gave the origin of these stones as Africa and claimed that they were carried through the air to Ireland by giants. In 1136, Welshman Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote the History of the Kings of Britain, which contained many epic tales, including the legends of King Arthur. According to Geoffrey, Britain was first populated by giants during the era before the Great Flood. Geoffrey also claimed that the rocks of Stonehenge were healing rocks called the Giant's Dance, or the Giant's Ring, which giants had originally brought from Africa to Ireland for their healing properties, and that Merlin the Wizard, along with King Uther Pendragon, father of King Arthur, took the stones from Ireland after slaughtering 7,000 Irish. Just for the record, we are not saying that is the origin of Stonehenge. That's what the British themselves say in their own mythology. Geoffrey of Monmouth also claimed that Britain was founded by the Greek Brutus of Troy, after Brutus had defeated the giants who were the only inhabitants of Britain, which at the time was called Albion. Brutus established New Troy, which later became known as London, on the banks of the Thames. Brutus also named the island Britain after himself. Brutus was well known in medieval England as the first king of Britain. Probably the most famous line in any of Shakespeare's plays is the line, "Even you, Brutus," when Brutus the betrayer stabbed his best friend Julius Caesar in the back. It should be pointed out that the Brutus that named Britain after himself is not the same Brutus that stabbed Julius Caesar in the back. He was called Brutus the Backstabber. The Brutus that named Britain after himself was Brutus of Troy. Today the word Brutus is associated with betrayal and treachery, but the original meaning of the word Brutus was savage animal, ignorant, or dense. If you look at these two pictures, the top image is the discovery of Dronehenge. The bottom image is what it looked like at its peak. Interestingly, Dronehenge may have been buried to protect it. Ireland has not been heavily excavated over the years, and there are thousands and thousands of unexamined and undiscovered sites. A recent drought parched the land and revealed thousands of previously unknown structures. 40 previously unknown monuments have been recently identified in the vicinity of Newgrange alone. So if we look at this top image, there's Newgrange, the most famous Stone Age temple on earth. And all of these new structures were found within a mile radius. This was the capital of Atlantis Ireland at one time. In 2018, Irish historian and photographer Anthony Murphy discovered Dronehenge and dozens of other sites simply using a drone and Google Earth. The same tools can be used all across the world to identify historical sites. Analysis of a butchered knee bone from a brown bear, which was found in a cave in County Clare, indicates that humans lived on the island of Ireland 12,500 years ago, right in the middle of the Younger Dryas mini Ice Age period, when Ireland is supposed to have been deserted. This also shows that the ancient Irish were eating bears and most likely hunting them. 3 separate sets of man-made Stone Age flints have been found in Ireland dating back at least 300,000 years and possibly much more. The current estimate on them is 300,000 to 400,000 years. Humans have lived on Ireland at least 10 times longer than the current estimates. We will all have to wait for the science to catch up on this one. New scientific research proves that the warm waters of the Atlantic Gulf Stream continued to flow during the Ice Age. While at one time, most and possibly even all of Ireland was under a glacial ice sheet, this was much further back in time than the current estimates suggest. Although Britain and Ireland are neighbouring islands, the difference in their native species is astonishing. Ireland has many unique species. For example, the Irish hare and stoat are genetically very different and much older than their British counterparts, proving that Ireland was habitable much earlier than Britain. There are many unique plants, birds, freshwater fish and eels in Ireland. By the way, eels are on Earth for about 300 million years, making them the oldest fish on Earth. We are of the opinion that eels hold the key to understanding evolution on Earth.
Located near Dublin is the Boyne Valley, the capital of ancient Ireland, and it's located in a fertile central plain, just as the legend of Atlantis described.
The Hill of Tara was once the ancient seat of power in Ireland. The High King of Ireland sat at Tara, and to this day County Meath is known as the Royal County. According to mythology, Ireland's ancient coronation stone, the Leafall, or the Stone of Destiny, was brought to Tara by the godlike people, the Tuatha De Danann, as one of their sacred objects. It was said to roar when touched by the rightful King of Ireland. An Egyptian bead necklace was found at the Hill of Tara during an excavation in 1955. In ancient times, new laws were decreed and decided at Tara, making it the world's first and the father of all parliaments. At least 100 new monuments have been discovered on the Hill of Tara thanks to non-invasive scanning technology. Only 2 monuments at Tara have ever been excavated. Tara is an absolute treasure trove of ancient history that has never been excavated, as is the entire Boyne Valley, as is the entire island of Ireland for that matter. Interestingly, early in the 20th century, a group of Israelites came to Tara with the conviction that the Ark of the Covenant was buried on the famous hill. And interestingly, the ancient Hebrew and Irish languages are very similar. Some even think that Christianity didn't come to Ireland, it came from Ireland and got mutilated the further it got from its source.
Also close to the Hill of Tara is the Tara Mines. These are the largest zinc mines in all of Europe, and there is also concrete quarries, both of which were used from ancient times. The ancient Irish invented concrete, not the Romans.
Newgrange is the circular temple of Atlantis that Plato described as being half a stadia wide. Half a stadia is 83 metres, Newgrange is 84 or 85 metres depending on which measurements you take. Newgrange is probably the oldest temple on earth. The entire Newgrange mound contains an estimated 200,000 tonnes of material that was moved to and around the site. It's estimated that construction would have taken 30 years with a workforce of about 300 highly skilled master builders, stonemasons and architects. Some materials were transported from over 50 kilometres away. The outside of the temple is coated with a white quartz, a magnetic stone. The ancient Irish were masters of magnetism. Sacred ancient knowledge regarding magnetism, ley lines and the magnetosphere has been lost and awaits rediscovery. The mound represents the womb and fertility. It symbolises Father Sun fertilising Mother Earth with its life-giving rays at the winter solstice and the harvest 9 months later. The winter solstice, usually on December 21st, is the time of the year when the sun falls to the lowest point in the sky and remains there for 3 days before rising again on December 25th. December 25th was the pagan festival of the unconquerable sun, which signalled the rebirth of a new year. 9 months later, on August the 21st, the autumn equinox celebrated the end of the harvest. Similar mythology is associated with the Native American mounds. So the ancients worshipped nature, the sun, the moon, the earth, the elements, water, all these things. The ancients called the Son of God, or God's Son. And the mound represented the female pregnant belly and the womb. They honoured male and female equally. Most crops take 9 months from start to finish. A human pregnancy takes 9 months from start to finish. Most animal pregnancies, the cow, for example, takes 9 months from start to finish, and the cow was sacred in ancient Ireland. And it, by the way, is the origin of the holy cow worshipped all around the world. Newgrange's alignment with the sun allows for leap years. The highly advanced Egyptians never managed this feat and had to introduce a 1460-year Sothic cycle to overcome it. This points to a truly stunning level of intellectual and mathematical achievement by the ancient Irish. The Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of the gods who at one time ruled Ireland, were said to have erected Newgrange. In these two photographs, on the top photograph we get an image of Newgrange, circular temple covered with white magnetic quartz. The bottom image is the passage. as you can see, that represents the light fertilizing the womb on the 21st of December. The 21st of December, the winter solstice, was a sacred time. That's when the sun died in the sky. In other words, it stopped falling or rising. It just stood still, and then it rose again 3 days later on December 25th. The pagan festival of the unconquerable sun was celebrated all over Europe at the time, including in Rome, Greece, Egypt, Ireland, Britain, France, Spain, etc. Newgrange has a lot of Stone Age carvings which represent the sun, the moon, and the stars. One of the carvings is the moon boat, or the lunar boat. This is one of the most sacred teachings in the ancient Egyptian religion, which they got from Atlantis Ireland. The carvings also contain sacred geometry symbols, including the seed of life. In ancient Ireland, the sun represented Lu and was seen as the shining face of God, the light of the world. The ancient Irish Ogham tree alphabet is the oldest alphabet in the world. It not only predates other codes of writing, it is as old as the Stone Age itself. The Ogham language features heavily in Irish mythology, suggesting its use from the most ancient of times. It was called a tree alphabet as most Ogham was carved into trees and timber posts, although it was also carved into stones, just like this image. There are roughly 400 stones known to contain Ogham markings, 360 of which are in Ireland. Ogham contained 25 characters, each of which was both a letter, a number, and it was also a secret hand signal. You have 5 fingers, and it was 5 sets of 5 was how it worked. The Ogham tree alphabet has been found in an ancient Arabic manuscript found in Egypt, and Ogham inscriptions have also been found in Colorado, USA. Ogham is very similar to the ancient Quipu, a knotted string alphabet used by the Incas. Similar knotted string alphabets were used by the ancient Chinese, Hawaiians, and some orders of monks. The Phoenicians used very similar numbers to Ogham. Some suggest Ogham is a string language, just like computer programming. Ogham spirals just like a tree. The Book of Ballymote contains a full translation of Ogham and is the Rosetta Stone for the world's ancient written languages. And legends attribute the invention of Ogham to Ogma, a deity of Irish mythology and a member of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the tribe of the gods. The development of a language is a long and slow process that occurs over many thousands of years. The ancient Irish language has almost 1 million words, while most languages has less than 200,000, which gives you an indication of how old and developed the language was. What's even more impressive is that the Irish language has not been an everyday language in most parts of Ireland for almost 1,000 years. And when the British invaded Ireland, the punishment under the penal laws of speaking Irish was death. Anyone who even spoke the language was executed. There's an old Irish expression from the time that says, "Our language was spoken long before the English came and will be spoken long after they're gone." The old Irish believed that it wasn't those that could inflict the most suffering, but those that could endure it that would eventually prevail. So the Irish language has survived in difficult times. Had that language have continued to be spoken by most people, it would have a lot more words today. Thankfully, the language has survived, as have many of the old books. Just as Ogham is the missing link to the world's written languages, the Irish Gaelic language is the missing link and the Rosetta Stone to the world's spoken languages. The Old Gaelic Irish is the missing Indo-European root language, the mother tongue that scholars have sought for centuries. Ireland's ancient language was the root of the old languages of Babylon, Arabia, Phoenicia, the Hebrews, and much more. The first Irish and Hebrew letters were called after trees. And in Hindu Sanskrit, the word Arya, or Arya, means noble. The word Aryan means from Erin. Erin is Ireland's ancient name. And the language of the Arikoti, the ancient Irish, and the Kuti, the ancient Persians, is remarkably similar. Now, if we take a look at these two illustrations, the top illustration is the ancient Irish language. It's incredibly decorative, it's very unique, nowhere else in the world uses letters like that. The top image is from the Book of Kells, one of the most famous books on earth. The language is beautifully crafted and it's very ornate, very well designed. By the way, there is a secret code embedded into the Book of Kells, its illustrations, and the first letter of each chapter. This code is also embedded in many ancient Irish books. The bottom image is from the Book of Ballymote, and it is the only book on earth that explains the Ogham language. This is the Rosetta Stone for the world's languages. If you take a quick look, you can see all the different characters of the language and how it spirals outwards. You can also see here it's like a string language. DNA is also a string language. And computer programmers claim that the Ogham language is created in the same way as a computer language. So there's probably a lot more to that language than meets the eye. The gift of agriculture was one of the greatest gifts ever given to humanity. Farming began in Ireland with domestication of cattle, horses, goats, sheep, pigs, fowl and wolfhounds. The Céide fields in County Mayo are thought to be the oldest agricultural fields in the world. Various trees grew at Céide fields, providing firewood, building materials and food. Ancient ploughs, farming tools and cairn stones used for the milling of flour have all been found at the Céide fields, as have livestock pens. Ireland's temperate climate, lack of predators and isolation made it perfect for the development of farming. Now if you take a look at that top image, that's a picture of the Céide fields, which are located on the Atlantic Ocean on the edge of some very steep cliffs. It's truly a spectacular sight. The bottom image is a picture of wild barley. Cereals are the edible grains of grass plants. So oats, wheats and barley were crops first developed in Ireland by selectively breeding wild grasses. The original grasses, such as meadow barley, that were first cultivated in Ireland still exist and grow there in the wild. And genetic testing can prove this theory. Cereals were the building blocks of the world's great civilizations. Egypt, Greece, Rome and Britain were all built on them. Without great cereals, there was no great civilizations. The ancient Irish used charcoal to create highly fertile soil and brought this technique to the world. Charcoal traps nutrients and is a breeding ground for soil bacteria, which is essential for soil health. In South America, the soil that this technique creates is called terra preta, which means dark earth. Charcoal, water and soil bacteria can turn even sand into fertile soil. Charcoal, which is often called biochar, can also be added to the diet of cattle to reduce methane emissions and aid digestion. The ancient Irish also farmed kelp, a vitamin-rich seaweed which can produce 4 tonnes of crop per acre of sea. So in the earliest times, the ancient Irish survived on hunting, on farming, on fishing, but they also could eat seaweed. And seaweed is surprisingly nutritious.
The ancient Irish probably invented the wheel and first discovered fire. Interestingly, from the most ancient times in Ireland, the bonfire was a sacred gathering. There was bonfires to celebrate Easter, bonfires to celebrate Lunasa, Christmas and several other festivals. To this very day, bonfires are lit at Easter and Lunasa, while the orange tradition in Ireland continued the ancient Irish tradition by lighting bonfires on the 12th of July.
The ancient Irish made butter, cream and cheese from the milk of cows and goats, which they stored in cold underground pits and in coal bogs. 4,000-year-old bog butter has recently been discovered, and that top picture is an image of the bog butter. So that's 4,000 years old. The ancient Irish had refrigeration. Cairn stones were developed to mill grains into flour. As the ancient Irish had access to fire, flour, milk, water and eggs, they were able to make bread all year round. Stores of vegetables, apples, and hazelnuts were also vitally important winter rations. Herbs were also grown and used as foods, medicines, and ointments. The Irish were master fishermen, which provided year-round food, as did hunting. The eel was a particularly important source of highly nutritious fats and vitamin C, and boyne curraghs have been used to fish for salmon since the Stone Age. The Irish also hunted elk, deer, rabbit, squirrel, and many other creatures. A fullacht fia was used to boil water to cook meats and stews for the community. Stones were heated in a blazing fire before being placed into the water to boil. The fullacht fia was also used for the washing and dyeing of cloth and working of leather. Fullacht fias are known as burnt mounds and have been found in Britain, Sweden, and Switzerland. There are thousands of them across Ireland. If we look at this bottom image, this is a fullacht fia. So it's really just a hole in the ground. This is a fullacht fia, so it's a hole in the ground. Here we've got timber and a lot of stones. You can just about see the stones at the bottom. And the stones are heated and placed into the water, which then boils. Vegetables and meat are also placed into the water to cook for the community. And then the byproduct of burning the timber, the ash, would have been used to fertilise the soil. Ash is good for fertilising the soil. It's not quite as good as charcoal, but it's still beneficial. Beekeeping was first developed in Ireland, as was the milking of cattle and goats. And in ancient times, Ireland truly was the land of milk and honey. It was in ancient Ireland that cattle were first domesticated. Cattle were used for milk, meat, and to pull ploughs. Lactose tolerance is the ability to break down the sugar in non-human milk, such as cow's milk. And lactose intolerance is the inability to do this. Ireland has the highest concentration of lactose tolerance on earth, along with Denmark, which has been developed over thousands of years, indicating that the Irish had milk from ancient times. Ireland has several native breeds of cattle, including the Dexter, Kerry, Irish Mild, and White Park. The milk or milch cow was the highest unit of currency under Ireland's ancient Brehon laws, the oldest laws on earth, the laws of the land. One of the most famous stories of Irish mythology is the cattle raid of Cooley, or the Tawn Bow as it's called in Irish, which was an epic tale fought over two prize bulls, one white and one reddish brown. The descendants of these cattle are the modern day White Park and Limousin breeds. Limousin cattle are one of the world's top beef breeds. However, the White Park is an endangered rare breed. British cattle breeders in particular have done an excellent job keeping this rare Irish breed, and many others I might add, alive. The Milky Way got its name from the ancient Irish astronomers who described it as the way of the white cow. Ireland's ancient astronomers regarded it as a heavenly reflection of the River Boyne, as above, so below. If you look at these two images, the top image is the two bulls from the Brown Bull of Cooley's story. The bull on the left is, as you can see, a reddish brown. That's the modern day Limousin cattle. The bull on the right is the modern day White Park cattle, which is also the cattle at the bottom. This is a beautiful ancient breed, a native breed to Ireland. This breed is almost extinct. There are very few of these cattle left, and hopefully we see them rebred in Ireland and all across the world. They were a dual purpose breed, which is probably why they've died out a little. They were both milk and beef, whereas most cattle nowadays is one or the other. And they perfectly match the description of the cattle found in the Irish mythology of white cattle with black or coloured noses and ears.
Now, the bull's scrotum was used as the world's first football. The ancient Irish used a bull's scrotum and stuffed it with straw and hay and stitched it together. So the ancient Irish were the world's first footballers.
It was also in ancient Ireland that horses were first domesticated. The Irish hobby horse provided the foundation bloodline for the world's thoroughbred racehorses and several other breeds. DNA origin studies prove that 68% of the modern thoroughbred racehorse is actually derived from the Irish hobby horse, its closest genetic relative. DNA studies have also determined that the speed gene came from the Irish hobby horse, which was an extremely fast horse, and not from Arabian stallions as is often claimed. The context here is that the fastest horses on earth today all get their genetics from Irish horses. And there has been a lot of misinformation that it was Arabian horses or British horses or different horses that developed the thoroughbred. The thoroughbred racehorse is predominantly the Irish hobby horse with some modern genetics from other areas. Officially, the Irish hobby horse is extinct. However, it is possible to rebreed them using the existing genetics of the Irish Draft, Connemara ponies and other native Irish breeds. Ireland has the best horse breeders in the world who are more than capable of this task. And it would be great to see the Irish hobby horse revived. Horse racing is hugely popular in Ireland and she has many racing festivals. It was in ancient Ireland that horse racing, chariot racing and show jumping were all first developed. The chariot plays a huge part in Irish mythology. Gods, goddesses and heroes all had special horses and chariots. This transferred to the mythology of other cultures, particularly the myth of a god or hero pulling the sun or the moon across the sky in a magical solar or lunar chariot. The myth of a solar or lunar chariot, the sun or the moon being pulled across the sky in a chariot, is found all around the world, and that myth originated in ancient Ireland. White horses play particular importance in Irish mythology and the mythology of the wider world. In one famous Irish myth, Niamh took Oisin on a white horse to Tír na nÓg, the land of the youth, the land of promise or the promised land. So in Irish mythology, Tír na nÓg is the promised land. If we take a look at these two images, the bottom image is of an Irish draft horse, which is genetically very, very similar to an Irish hobby horse. The top image is of Niamh, who took Oisin on a white horse to Tír na nÓg, the promised land. When you see a white horse, it usually symbolises something special in mythology, not just in Ireland, but around the world. The ancient Irish added horsehair to concrete. Despite what many people think, concrete was invented in Ireland, not Rome. Ireland's mysterious round towers are built with concrete which includes horsehair in the mortar. This horsehair can be carbon dated to prove the true age of Ireland's round towers, which are so much older than people realise.
Speaking of high horses, scientists and academics often ridicule mythologies and religious traditions. The world's mythologies contain grains of truth surrounded by a lot of BS, a lot of exaggeration. But it's the BS is the fertilizer that keeps the grain of truth alive. And the ancients hid wisdom in mythology and superstition to keep their secrets alive. Mythology is not designed to be taken literally. It's designed to educate, entertain, and keep secret information alive. Ireland has a deep mythology that has been developed since the most ancient of times. With the understanding that real events get wildly exaggerated, we can explore mythology and find rich, hidden wisdom. It's the nature of the human mind to distort, delete, and exaggerate, which is why the old stories endure. All around the world we find the Great Flood myth. Legends of a great deluge are found in virtually every tradition and culture on earth. This was a real event which occurred 11,600 years ago, which you will learn about later.
Scientists and academics often ridicule mythology and dismiss it as rubbish, superstition and pseudoscience, not realising the grains of wisdom stored within it. It must be remembered that what was once considered pseudoscience often becomes fact. The facts of science keep on changing, yet the old stories stay the same. And the human mind is hardwired for remembering stories, not facts. Clearly we need both. Actually, I'd just like to point out something here. If a religion doesn't like what you're saying, they call it blasphemy. And if science doesn't like what you're saying, it's called pseudoscience. The trick used by most people, if they don't like the message, is to shoot the messenger and label it gibberish, pseudoscience, superstition, rubbish, blasphemy, heresy, or any of the above. So just for the record, we don't ask anyone to believe a word we say, and it's actually very easy to spot a false prophet. They ask you to believe them. Just like everyone on the planet, we do the best we can based on our current level of ignorance. We don't claim to have all the answers. We don't claim to be right. We present the information as best it is, and we ask you not to believe us, but to do your own thinking. In ancient Ireland, science and spirituality worked together to understand the mysteries of life and the universe. This is called philosophy, which is the love of wisdom, and is the parent of both science and spirituality, two sides of the one coin. Religion needs science, and science needs religion. Both tell you that they're right. There is not a person in the world who has all the answers. Beware those who ask you to believe them. Much better to think for yourself. Many of the greatest scientists who have ever walked the earth were very spiritual. For example, Einstein famously said, "I just want to know how God created the world. I just want to understand the mind of God," was another one of his quotes. He also said that if you want intelligent children, read them fairy tales. And he spoke at length about the importance of the imagination.
The Tuatha De Danann were a supernatural, highly advanced race who, according to one legend, arrived in Ireland in ships from the sky. They were also known as the Sun People, the Shining Ones, and the Little People. Ireland's most famous heroes, including Lugh, Setanta, Cuchulainn, and several others, were members of the De Dananns.
The Tuatha De Danann means tribe of the goddess Danu, who is the mother goddess, or by their earlier name Tuatha, which means tribe of the gods. Danu, or Anu, is a mother goddess associated with the land and the seas. Similar goddesses are found all over the world. The De Dananns had special advanced knowledge, science, technology and weaponry. They fought many battles with the giant Fomorians and later invaders of Ireland. In one legend, De Danann King Nuada lost a hand in battle and was fitted with a silver robotic hand which moved like a normal hand and flesh even grew over it. The De Dananns intermarried with the giant Fomorians and built stone circles, fairy forts and mounds which are considered sacred to this day in Ireland. There is also a lot of speculation that the De Dananns built Ireland's round towers. As we mentioned earlier, those round towers were built with mortar which contained horse hair. By carbon dating the horse hair, the age of the round towers will be established once and for all. Some people even think that Ireland's round towers were built by the Fomorian giants. Nobody knows for sure how old Ireland's round towers really are. Time will tell who really built them. In these two images, the top picture is a depiction of the Tuatha De Danann. The bottom image is a snippet from the Hobbit movie. The De Dananns are similar to the elves in the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies. The De Dananns were considered in Irish mythology as a divine mortal race who brought advanced knowledge, skills, music and poetry to the people. The Irish annals tell us that some of the De Dananns left Ireland during the Great Flood and returned several years later with the wisdom of the world, having learned it in the northern islands, while De Danann Queen Banba survived the Great Flood by standing on a hill near the River Shannon. So Ireland has plenty of legends of life before the Great Deluge, during it and after it.
The greatest De Danann of all, Cuchulainn, received his warrior training in the islands off Scotland, and the Irish and Scots go back to the earliest of times. The De Dananns were known as the wandering De Dananns because they travelled the world.
The Greek Pythagoras met the De Dananns. He thought them godlike and begged them to teach him their secrets. Pythagoras was considered one of the greatest minds of all time and predated Socrates, Plato and Aristotle. Pythagoras is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, mathematician of all time. Some legends portrayed the Danans as the fair and peaceful little people who were around 3 to 5 foot tall, which gave rise to the elves, fairy, and leprechaun legends. Nobody really knows what these guys were. Some people think they were angels, others think they were aliens, others think they were time travelers. But the most likely and logical explanation is that they were highly educated. Whatever they were very, very special. The legends associated with them is truly incredible. There are many tribes in Irish mythology, but we're only going to focus on two here: the Danans and the giant Fomorians. Ireland is known around the world as the land of giants for very good reason. An Irish giant, a Fomorian, was found in a bog in County Antrim in the 1870s, near the world-famous Giant's Causeway. This giant was 12 foot 2 inches tall with 6 toes on the right foot. This giant was exhibited in Dublin, Liverpool and Manchester at sixpence a head before getting lost in carriage on its way to London in 1876. A court case was filed after the loss of the body, while the peculiar find was also reported in the press at the time. There are also Irish press records of other similar finds, while Ireland has been known the world over as the land of giants. The Fomorians were a race of 8 to 12 foot giants and the original inhabitants of Ireland. In one legend, the sea rose and drowned most of them, just like Plato's legend of Atlantis. But some survived on higher ground, while 30 escaped to Britain, Greece and the northern islands. In Ireland there are several unexcavated sites which are thought to contain the remains of giants. The Irish giants who went to Greece were called the Firbolgs, which means the bagmen, as they were enslaved by the Greeks and made to carry bags of construction materials. After 230 years of slavery, they left Greece around the same time that the Israelites are said to have left Egypt, and sailed in a great fleet to Iberia, which is Spain, and then on to Ireland. United States President Abraham Lincoln made reference to the giants whose bones fill the mounds of America, as did several New York Times articles. Giant bones are reported to have been found in the mounds of the USA, and there are many, many press cuttings to that effect. There are legends of a race of red-haired giants with 2 sets of teeth and 6 fingers or toes from all around the world. The Book of Glendalough is stored in Oxford, England. This precious book lists the entire genealogy of the Irish giants, going right back to the biblical Noah, who was the 10th from Adam and Eve. Giantism is caused by the AIP gene, and the highest concentration in the world of this so-called giant gene is found in Mid-Ulster, where 1 in 150 people carry this DNA. So let's just digest that. The Book of Glendalough in Oxford, England, contains the entire genealogy of the Irish giants, going right back to the biblical Noah. So in other words, this book has the names, the husbands, the wives, the children, where they lived, and the details of all the Irish giants. Giants were absolutely a real thing in ancient Ireland. But they were not 100 foot tall as some legends. They were 8 to 12 foot tall. All around the world we find legends of giants that are very, very similar. What do you think is more likely? That people were a couple of foot taller than they are today, or that hundreds of different independent tribes all around the world made up almost the same legends? Giantism and dwarfism are nothing more than expressions of our genetic past. In Mid-Ulster, the highest concentration of the giant gene anywhere in the world is found, where 1 in 150 people carry it, and so far it has been traced back to 18 families. Now, interestingly, Nit was an ancestor of both the Fomorian giants and the Danans. But Nit was also the oldest Egyptian god and was said to have been the supreme creator of the entire universe and all it contains. She was also said to be the mother of Ra, the sun. Nit was the Egyptian goddess of wisdom, and she is also known as Sophia. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. The word philosophy literally means the love of Sophia, the love of wisdom. It is the parent of both science and spirituality. Philosophy is the mother of both science and religion. The ancient Irish were the world's first philosophers. They honoured the awesomeness of creation and had a scientific religion. They worshipped nature and honoured her great emblems, the moon, the sun, and the earth.
Incidentally, the current Irish flag is green, white, and orange. It's called the tricolour. But that's not the original Irish flag. The tricolour was changed to green, white, and orange in an attempt to make peace between the green and the orange. The green tradition and the orange tradition in Ireland. The native green and the orange settlers. The original flag was actually green, white, and gold, and it's thought that gold was for the sun, white was for the moon, and green was for earth.
They understood the utter dependence on the life-giving rays and light from the sun and watched its every move. They also honoured the 5 elements: fire, water, earth, air, and ether, or spirit. They respected wisdom, honour, and mastery above all else. They understood that man has both a lower animal mind and a higher angel mind, or a soul, and that wisdom came from mastering the animal within. This is basic biology. All humans have a reptilian mind, as does every other mammal. That's what keeps your heart beating. An uncivilized human is like an animal. A highly civilized human is like an angel. And the word angel simply means messenger. The ancient Irish were the world's first scientists and saw no difference between science and spirituality. They believed that the soul was immortal, a spark of the divine fire. The words soul and the Latin word sol for sun and the Spanish word sol for sun comes from the Irish word solus, which means light. Wisdom is in the light, or enlightenment. They sought a state of total reverence and understanding of things. They did not want to believe, they wanted to understand. In other traditions, this was called a state of gnosis, or knowing. There is a world of difference between believing and understanding. The smaller your mind, the more you believe. Look at a young child. A child at 3 or 4 years of age believes everything. But the more mature and developed we get, the more we want to understand.
The root of so much human suffering is the need to be right based on what we believe. There is a big difference between belief and faith. Faith is a deep inner knowing. Belief is a prison.
The root of so much human suffering is the need to be right. The numbers 3 and 9 were especially sacred numbers in ancient Ireland. They also understood that nature was two-sided, both life and death, creation and destruction, positive and negative. They understood that everything has both positive and negatives, and that the entire universe was made out of pairs of opposites.
The entire universe is made out of energy. Energy is 50% positive, 50% negative. Why would you be any different? The cure for negative thinking is positive thinking. The cure for positive thinking is negative thinking. When you add positive and negative thinking together, you get power thinking. Wisdom is seeing the two sides of the coin.
The opposite of wisdom is ignorance. Ignorance is the true enemy to human development. Wisdom is in the light and ignorance is in the darkness. However, both are essential. One does not work without the other. We are all born helpless and ignorant. Our job is to die helpful and wise.
We all have to climb out of the slime of ignorance. The golden age of man will be an age of wisdom.
The destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria was one of the greatest crimes ever committed against humanity. The library was attacked and damaged several times before its final destruction, most likely in 415 AD, by the Romans. Close to 1 million precious scrolls were destroyed, setting back humanity thousands of years. Hypatia of Alexandria was a leading scientist, astronomer, mathematician, and curator of the Great Library at a time when women were considered the property of men and second-class citizens. She was skinned alive and murdered by a Christian mob led by a lector named Peter. A lector is somebody who reads the Bible in the church. The mob were followers of Cyril, the Bishop of Alexandria, who, according to renowned astronomer Carl Sagan, despised Hypatia because she was a woman who symbolised learning and science, which were largely identified by the Roman Church as paganism. Hypatia was all but forgotten by history. Rome declared Cyril a saint. Many scholars view Hypatia's murder as the birth of an age of ignorance, where people were not allowed to think for themselves. Ireland's ancient libraries, monasteries, and culture have been desecrated over the centuries. Millions of books were destroyed by successive English invaders. The destruction of libraries, temples, and schools has occurred throughout history all over the world. Thousands of scholars, scientists, and free thinkers have been persecuted, burned at the stake, tortured, labelled as heretics, witches, antichrists, pseudoscientists, for even daring to think and speak for themselves. Since the beginning of time, empires that have preached love, peace, and prosperity have practiced war and deception. Their actions speak a lot louder than words. If you want to know who controls you, it's who you can't question or criticise. And it's very easy to spot a false prophet. They ask you to believe them. In such matters, the Irish expression, wise up, seems appropriate. Wise up means grow up and do your own thinking. The plague of Justinian started in the eastern part of the Roman Empire in 541 AD, shortly after a cosmic event in 536 AD which caused global crop failures. We will cover that later. The plague lasted for 2 centuries, decimating Europe and the wider world. As many as 50 million people are estimated to have died, between 1.25% of the entire world's population at the time. The plague's impact was similar to that of the Black Death that devastated Europe in the Middle Ages. Both plagues were caused by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. The same bacteria is suspected for the Stone Age population decline, which was a rapid collapse in the populations of Europe and Asia between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. The population of Mohill, County Leitrim, was devastated by the Justinian plague, and this highly infectious plague would have quickly spread all across Ireland, devastating the population. There were also huge crop failures at the time in Ireland and all across the world. Recent research has proven that Ireland's population was in serious decline for 300 years before the Vikings arrived around 800 AD, in line with the Justinian plague outbreak and crop failures. It was during this time that Ireland was said to have had a golden age, after converting to Christianity without a drop of blood having ever been spilt. Apparently Ireland's round towers were also built at this time. Both dubious claims for a country ravished by plague and famine. The facts are a lot more sinister. In 1155 AD, Pope Adrian IV, an Englishman and head of the Roman Catholic Church, authorised the English invasion of Ireland. The papal bull, called Laudabilter, urged Henry II to invade Ireland to bring the independent Irish Church and the people of the island under the control of the Vatican, and for the Irish to pay the Peter's Pence tax to Rome. 18 successive kings of England, from Henry II until Henry VIII, used the title Lord of Ireland and claimed that it had been granted by Pope Adrian IV's successor, Pope Alexander III. For centuries, attempts at sourcing the original Laudabilter document have proved futile, and the Vatican says the original Pope's bull is no longer in existence. Claims made across Europe that the Irish had lost their way was a deception to cover a land grab involving Roman popes, English kings, and bleeding Irish hearts. The British proceeded to rape, murder, and pillage their way across Ireland just as they did in India, America, and all around the world. The original meaning of the Ulster phrase "no surrender" was actually "no surrender to Rome." During the Great Hunger of 1845 to 1849, over 1 million Irish starved to death and another million emigrated. the population of Ireland was completely decimated. While it's often called the famine, a more accurate term is the starvation. The British exported millions of tons of grain from Ireland as they watched the Irish starve in what can only be described as the greatest act of genocide in the 19th century. Over the centuries, the Vatican authorised several so-called holy wars, including the Spanish colonisation of the Americas. These guys were called the conquistadors. This act of genocide had an estimated 20 million deaths, 3 times the number of deaths associated with the Nazi Holocaust. In more recent times, the Vatican has been rocked by thousands of horrific sex abuse scandals. In 2017, a mass grave containing the remains of an estimated 800 children was found in a Catholic care home in County Galway, Ireland. In 2019, a group representing Irish sex abuse victims reported the Vatican and the British to the International Criminal Court for historical crimes against humanity.
Long time ago, said the fine old woman. Long time ago, this proud old woman did say there was war and death, plundering and pillage. My children starved by mountain, valley and sea. Their wailing cries, they shook the very heavens, and my 4 green fields ran red with their blood said she.
Astronomy was first developed in Ireland and they mapped out the stars for thousands of years. The ancient Irish named the Milky Way, which is derived from the Irish Bealach na Bóithne, which means Way of the White Cow. The early Irish carved images of an ancient solar eclipse into giant stones at Lough Crew in County Meath over 5,000 years ago, on the 30th of November 3340 BC to be exact. This is the oldest known recorded solar eclipse in history, predating the next closest recording by almost 2,000 years. This level of mathematical knowledge is truly astonishing. Irish Stone Age monuments are aligned to the movements of the sun, moon, stars, and the 4 cardinal points. Many mounds have cruciform chambers aligned to the sun cross, which is the 2 solstices and the 2 equinoxes. Ireland's museums have many examples of gold sun discs, also called sun crosses or solar crosses, dating back thousands of years. Similar sun discs are found in South America. So if we just take a look here, the top image is the Milky Way, the Way of the White Cow, and the ancients believed that to be a heavenly reflection of the River Boyne, as above, so below. The bottom images is Irish sun or solar crosses. These represented the sun, hence the gold, and the 4 cardinal points of the sun. So when the sun is at the highest in the sky in the summer, when the equinox in the autumn, equinox means equal day and night, when the sun is at the lowest point in the winter, the 21st of December, and when the sun is at the equinox in the spring. So that's the sun cross of the sun. That symbol is found all over the world. Astrology, the interpretation of the heavens, started in Ireland and, like many things, was mutilated the further it got from its source. The Egyptians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, and Romans were all pagan astrologers who based their religions and mythologies on the movements of the heavens. It's quite ironic that the Roman Empire murdered millions of pagans after being a pagan city for 900 years. The 25th of December was celebrated in pagan Rome as the feast of the unconquerable sun for hundreds of years.
The Romans also worshipped Saturn as the king of the gods. Saturn was known as the binder or the unbinder, the lord of the realms, or the lord of the rings.
Astrotheology, which is the personification of the heavens, plays a huge part in most mythologies. For example, Helios was the Greek sun god who carried the sun across the sky every day in a solar chariot. In Irish mythology, the sun was said to be the shining face of Lu, the Irish sun god. Lunasa, which is the Irish month of August and the harvest festival, is associated with Lu. Lunasa means Lu's assembly. And Lunasa occurs 9 months after the winter solstice. And as we discussed earlier on, 9-month gestation period is how long a human is pregnant, how long a cow is pregnant, how long most animals is pregnant, and how long it takes between fertilizing the ground with seeds to a fully mature crop. The ancients somehow knew that the earth encircled the sun and the sun circled the central sun, which the ancients called Sophia, the all-seeing eye, the Most High, and several other names. They believed that the central sun was the seat of the Most High, the source of all life, all light, and all wisdom. It's only in recent decades that science has discovered a central sun, which is called a black hole. A black hole sucks in light, gases, planets, stars, and stardust, and shoots out light, water, elements, information, and all the building blocks needed to create new life.
Light carries information all across the galaxy. The Earth and everything on it, including you, is made out of stardust.
Science has spent decades building a house of cards that's about to come crashing down. It's not a big bang, it's a big brain, the great universal mind. Here we see the central sun. The ancients called this Sophia, which means wisdom. Now let's see, can we find our own sun and planets? Here we can see the planets circling the sun, and the sun circling the central sun. The ancient Irish developed the master and the apprentice system to develop crafts and innovation. In order to graduate, one had to prove that they had surpassed their master in learning by creating something that their master couldn't. This creation was called a masterpiece. This system remains the most effective form of education ever discovered. The fastest way to get what you want is to learn from someone who knows what you need to know, rather than trial and error. From the most ancient times, Ireland had a learned class of scholars and poets. The Irish bardic schools were ancient pre-Christian centres of learning. From the earliest times, Ireland's scholars had a reputation as being the best in the world. Ireland led the intellectual world and the higher arts of civilization. Great leaders flocked to Ireland's shores for light and learning. The ancient Irish had a network of druids, bards and poets to both educate and entertain the people. Because most people couldn't read or write, the spoken word was the main form of education. There are many unpublished poems and stories from ancient Ireland that have yet to be translated. This project awaits its scholar. People have searched for Atlantis for thousands of years. Atlantis Ireland and many of her treasures are stored in Ireland's universities and libraries. The Ull of Éireann was in charge of educating the people. The Ull of Éireann was equal in status to the High King of Ireland. It was the joint highest position in the land. So that'll show you how much education was valued in ancient Ireland. And the fine for killing an Ullov was equal to the fine for killing a king. The Ull of Éireann was the head of education in Ireland in ancient times and was equal, if not even more prestigious a position as the High King of Ireland. The ancient Irish developed Brehon laws thousands of years before the rest of the world had any form of legal system. This law of the land was enforced by the people themselves without needing a police force. Interestingly, the Irish police force today don't carry guns and are called the Gardaí Síochána, which means guardians of the peace. Ancient Ireland had wandering referees called the Brehons who adjudicated on disputes. The Brehon laws was a system based on the equality of all men and women. Women were entitled to enter all the same professions as men, and there was equal rights between the genders. Nobody was above the law, not even a king. Interestingly, the ancient Irish even had a form of divorce where you could get divorced within the first 12 months of marriage, but not a day later. This legal system demonstrates a society which can be seen as deeply humane and highly cultured. In fact, Ireland's very unique and advanced system of law has only one comparison anywhere else on earth in its complexity and its humanity, the Hindu Sanskrit, and there is a lot of connection between the ancient Irish and the Hindus going back to the very earliest of times. The Brehon laws are very different to other legal systems across time, as the emphasis is on fines rather than violent or capital punishment. The law was based on fines paid by the guilty and their family tribe to the victim. The wider family was responsible for their family members' behaviours, which kept people in line. The fine was called the honour price, and honour was highly treasured in Atlantis Ireland. New laws were agreed and decreed from the Hill of Tara for thousands of years, making it the world's first and the father of all parliaments. The top images is of some wise people agreeing on the wisest course of action. The bottom image is some written Brehon laws. Nobody knows when the Brehon laws first started. They go back thousands of years, and every time a Brehon made a judgment, it created a precedent. The Brehon laws died out after the English invasion of Ireland, and over the best part of 1,000 years, Irish culture was stamped out. Although records of the Brehon laws still survive, and there is a lot of wisdom in them. When describing Atlantis, Plato described how the temple flashed with the red light of orichalcum. This metal was red brass, an alloy of copper, tin and zinc. It is an extremely tough metal that can handle heavy loads, is rust resistant, and is widely used today for modern plumbing. It's commonly called copper. Orichalcos is the modern Greek word for brass. Red brass is also known as gunmetal, as it was used to make guns in recent times. The use of brass is mentioned several times in Irish mythology. So the ancient Irish were absolute masters of metalwork and metal alloys. The Ross Island mines in County Kerry was the first major copper mine in northwestern Europe. Shovels made from cattle bones and hammers made from stone cobbles have been found at the site. Mines in the region produced as much as 370 tonnes of copper during the Bronze Age. The early Irish also founded mines in the Basque region between France and Spain, which was one of its earliest outposts from quite an early age. One other point, the ancient Irish used a form of heating stones to break them. So they would heat up stones, smash them with hammers, and that's how they broke through to the metal. Gold annullas were worn by royalty and people of high social stature. Of the more than 100 gold annulla necklaces found all across Europe, 80 are from Ireland. And more Bronze Age gold hoards have been discovered in Ireland than anywhere else in Europe. The craftsmanship of the Ardagh chalice, Tara brooch, and Dunleavy flesh hook are unparalleled anywhere in the world. A copper axe found near Waterford, Ireland is almost identical to one found near LaPorte in Indiana, USA. And the ancient Irish had knowledge of metal alloys including bronze, brass, electrum, and iron long before the rest of the world. Iron slag, the byproduct of forging iron, has been found at the ancient hill of Tara. And as we mentioned earlier, Tara has never been excavated apart from 2 small mounds at it. Electrum is the alloy of gold and silver, and that's what the ancients used on the top of many of the pyramids. Not gold, electrum. Electrum represented the sun and the moon, gold and silver. Gold for sun, silver for moon. Electrum was both. If we take a look at these images, the top one is a gold annulla. The bottom one is the Ardagh chalice. This is one of the most spectacular pieces of metal work anywhere on earth. We suspect this is a lot older than people realise. And we suspect that the names of the apostles which are inscribed around here was added at a later date, although we offer no proof to that theory. Now, if you look at the intricacy of the gold work here, it is truly sensational. This was all done by hand. What we can all agree on is the intricacy of the metalwork here is absolutely sensational. It is stunning. Nowhere else in the world is this quality of metalwork found. It takes many thousands of years for culture to develop the arts, the ultimate sign of an advanced society. Mastery, the mastery of one's craft, was highly valued in ancient Ireland. Those who were masters were highly respected, and there were several local and national competitions to develop skills and promote the arts. The ancient Talton Games had competitions for every and all classes of art and crafts, including weaving, embroidery, spinning and dyeing of cloth, cookery, goldsmithing, jewellery making, carving, drawing, painting, poetry, art, etc. The winning of a national title called an All-Ireland was a huge honour, and this tradition continues today in sports and music. The spiral curbstones at Newgrange is one of the oldest pieces of art on earth. Ireland has thousands of Stone Age carvings. So the top picture there is one of the spiral carved stones from Newgrange. Flax linen, weaving and clay pottery were developed in Ireland from ancient times. And if you look at the bottom image, that's just an example of some weaved baskets. And the skill of weaving became the skill of boat building over time. Most of the old Irish gods were gods of the arts. For example, the pagan goddess Bridget, who was worshipped all over Europe by the Irish descendants, the Celts, was known as the patroness of poetry. The poet and bard were highly respected in Ireland. Storytelling was a huge part of culture and was how historical events were recorded. Bridget was also known in ancient Ireland as the Exalted One. The Talton Games were established circa 1896 BC, over 1,000 years before the Greek Olympic Games, which were first held in 776 BC. The Games were named after Talta, who was one of the most learned and accomplished ladies in all of Europe, and lasted for almost 3,000 years until 1169 AD, the time of the British invasion. The event became famous all over Europe and inspired the foundation of the Greek Olympic Games. The games consisted of every test of physical endurance and skill imaginable: horse and chariot racing, athletics, field sports, including hurling and football, combat, arts, crafts, music, poetry, and intellectual competitions. A universal truce was declared for the Cheltenham Games. No one could be arrested for any previous offences. All feuds and quarrels were paused for the Games. Fighting was strictly forbidden and severely dealt with. There was also a great fair, a marketplace for clothes, food, produce, livestock, household goods, and weaponry. There are records of Greek merchants having attended this fair. The ancient Irish played cod football, which had two main versions: field and cross country. The field game became the modern Gaelic football, while the epic cross country version became rugby. Cod, which was played in Ireland for over 1,000 years before rugby was apparently invented, involved wrestling your opponent to the ground, stripping them of possession, kicking, passing, running with the ball in your hand, passing the ball backwards, and ultimately getting the ball into the opponent's territory. All branches of the Gaelic race played cod, including the Scotch, the Welsh, where it was called Canapan, the Cornwall English, where it was called hurling, and the French Celts. Dublin University Football Club, which is today Trinity College, is the oldest documented rugby club on earth. The ancient Irish used a bull's scrotum stuffed with straw and hay, which was stitched up and used as a football. For the record, we are not saying that Rugby University in England, or any of the English universities, or the English people for that matter, haven't done an amazing job in spreading the game of rugby all around the world. And there is no doubt that they give the game its modern name. However, naming something is very different to inventing something.
In ancient Ireland, the modern day rugby was called rough and tumble.
The Irish invented rugby just as they invented Gaelic football, hurling, draughts, handball, and several other games. But of all of Ireland's sports, hurling is its most ancient of all, and is the fastest ball game on earth, the peaceful warrior sport. The ancient Irish invented sport to channel aggression. Sport, music, and poetry are among the best ways known to channel aggression. We will now take a look at three different sports. We will take a quick look at rugby, Gaelic football, and hurling. You will notice how similar rugby and Gaelic football are. Both have 15 aside, both have almost identical posts, and both are versions of football that uses hands and feet. And you will also understand why hurling is Ireland's warrior sport. It's most sacred.
Who took the ball, now it's leaning off the back of the Irish scrum, 3 metres short, presented for Stringer, O'Gara, crossfield kick, Shane Horgan's in position, oh yes, what a try, executed magnificently, that is as good a try as you will see all year, control from the scrum, pinpoint accuracy from O'Gara, magnificent fielding from Horgan, and that should really wrap this one up as a contest.
Absolutely, and England absolutely rattled, but what a score, and really nothing more than they deserved. A beautiful ball, and appropriate that the score might come from a field like that in the place we are, Croke Park. Fantastic.
Delivery from O'Gara was spectacular as the fielding of Shane Horgan, who scores his 19th try. Smiles aplenty on the Irish bench. O'Gara and O'Driscoll, no doubt proud of what they've achieved today. Wilkinson continues to try and marshal his troops, but it's been a lost cause for most of this game. Here's England again, giving it away, and this is the icing on the cake. Isaac Boss under the post. A perfect day for Irish rugby is rounded off with another try.
Well, shambolic from England, but a magnificent end to a fantastic Irish performance, and the crowd erupt. And what a way to finish. It was always the big match in Croke Park. This one of the two, this was the one. and to come out with such a comprehensive victory. Okay, fortuitous with the intercept at the end, but a fitting finish really to a fantastic Irish display, and almost a birthday present for your Ireland.
It was a day for an outpouring of emotion. It was a day to deliver, and Ireland and Eddie O'Sullivan can be well pleased with what they've achieved. Onwards to Edinburgh and another tilt at the Triple Crown they go. They won this and they won it in style. Final score of Croke Park, Ireland 43, England 13.
What an occasion, and sorry Bill, but what a scoreline. I mean, I suppose been very proud to be an Irishman all my life, but to be Irish today, I don't think I've ever been as proud just to be Irish on a day like today. I mean, for everybody involved in this whole occasion, from everybody involved in the GAA to the IRFU, but I think just what a fantastic and momentous day just for Ireland.
Dermot Marsden, 3 men against him. It releases Andrew McCann. How they could do with a goal like the one he got 2 years ago against the same opposition. Then it was a nice hot afternoon. It's quite cold and breezy now. This is inside towards McGrain. It comes back nicely. It's the first goal, and it's scored by Oisin McConville. It brings the Armagh fans to life. They're back in it. Only a point separating the teams. 19 minutes into the second half, a vital break. Watch as McConville was on hand, taking a little pass there and crashing it past Declan O'Keefe.
Fantastic piece of combined play that time, and a wonderful finish inside the near post from Oisin McConville. Now the game hopefully will come to life. Wonderful piece of play. Lovely little flick on.
It's anybody's match again. Armagh looking for the equaliser. Will they get it through Ronan Clark? Moynihan comes out. It's a good one, and it's over the bar, and the teams are level. The O'Rourke family very well represented in this Armagh panel. Dropped in neatly here. Once again, it is Stephen McDonnell, and he's put it over the bar. It's his third point. More significantly, Armagh lead the All-Ireland final. Tomas O'Shea feeding it in, and good defensive play by Armagh. It's out to Kieran McGeady, the captain. It's all over.
What a result, sure. Fantastic result for Armagh. Oh, what a credit to them, the way they applied themselves when everything seemed gone from them.
Kieran McGeady, the captain of the first ever Armagh team to win Sam. A delighted Kieran McGeady, and a delightful day. Look at that scene. Just quite amazing. Here comes Clem Smith. Kieran Carey leaving it there for James Moran. Up towards his brother Ollie. Score of 2 fine points in the first half. Dermot O'Sullivan here, coming out like a tank. Lifting the crowd, and he's put it over the bar. What an amazing point by the fullback.
If that doesn't lift Cork, nothing will. He came through like a JCB, and he shouldered out on his way. A fantastic score.
When he comes out, when you hit him with a shoulder, you better hit him properly.
Cork, you'd have to say they had the momentum. Then Clare steadied the ship, got a couple of points up, or 3 points up, and then the goal again from Cork is huge at this stage.
This is a super collect here by Cian Dillon. Collected it beautifully, flights it forward here towards Cathal McInerney. In goes Conor O'Sullivan, but emerging from it is Conor McGrath, and he means danger. He's got a player over. He buries it in the back of the Cork net. Conor McGrath, 62 minutes are gone. That could be the goal that will drive Clare forward to collect the Liam McCarthy Cup. It was poor defending, but there was no denying the quality and the run and the strike of Conor McGrath. His 4th goal in championship hurling, his 3rd this.
Well, you couldn't make this up during your wildest dreams. And Derek Horan showed great composure there. He really had no, he was right not to go for a shot, because he would have given a free puck out if he sent it wide, and he carried it in and ended up in the back of the net.
It's all over. It's all over. Champions. Clare are are the champions. Davy Fitzgerald has done.
Since you caught a hurley when you're young and played imaginative games with your friends, the game always finished up with winning the cup, and that was the Lee McCarthy Cup.
I was lucky enough that we won a couple, and a lot of great players didn't win.
I remember passing the cup on the way out onto the pitch and taking a quick glance at it and knowing that maybe in 70 minutes' time this could be your passport to immortality.
Till the day you die, it's going to stick in your mind, and it'll never leave you.
It's like all your birthdays have come at once. One of the great days of my life, to be honest.
See what it means to people. That really still lives with you, and you're probably still a child, really, every hurling man is when they see that cup.
To touch the Holy Grail once is enough for me. I'm happy and content with it.
You just get this feeling inside you that this is it, I'm alive, I'm living, like almost my life won't get any better than this moment. This is the pinnacle of my life.
I'm making my way home. I'm making my way.
Irish music, dancing and poetry has been part of Ireland since the earliest of times. Our people's love of music and poetry is revealed by the harp's prominence as a national icon. The goddess Eru, after whom Ireland is named, is often depicted with a harp, as are many of Ireland's key mythological figures. This top image is a depiction of Eru playing an ancient Irish harp. The harp is the official symbol of Ireland and was revered from the earliest of times. The harp was invented in Ireland, as were several other musical instruments. Legends of the harp and the magic of his music have been told in Ireland's legends for thousands of years. The music of the harp and whistles was so enchanting that on first hearing it, many of the European Celts believed the music came from the other world, as they had never heard anything like it before. Most had probably never even heard music before. The early Irish were the only people who had the delicate skills to mould the timber and ally the metals in order to create sophisticated musical instruments, and would have used the enchanting sounds of music to calm restless natives whenever they travelled. In more recent times, River Dance and The Lord of the Dance was a global success which left audiences spellbound, such was its uniqueness. This brings us towards the end of part 1, Atlantis Ireland. And I think the most appropriate thing we can do is spend a moment to sample some Irish music before we move on to part 2, the city of Atlantis.
Walking all the day near tall towers where falcons build their nests. Silver wing they fly, they know the call of freedom in their breasts. Saw black head against the sky, where twisted rocks run into the sea. Living on your western shore, saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic Sea and sang a song for Ireland, talking all the day with true friends who try to make you stay, telling jokes and news, singing songs to pass the night away. Watch the Galway salmon run like silver dancing, darting in the sun. Living on your western shore, saw summer sunsets, asked for more. I stood by your Atlantic Sea and sang a song for Ireland, drinking all the day in old pubs where fiddlers love to play. I saw land where no one has to fight. Waking in your dawn, I saw you crying in the morning light. Flying where the falcons fly, they twist and turn all in your air blue sky. Living on your western shore, so summer sunsets ask for more. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland.
So part 2, the city of Atlantis. This image is an artist's impression of the ancient city of Atlantis, based on Plato's writing. The main things about Plato's writing is 3 concentric circles of water and land. And the city of Atlantis was said to be huge, 20, 30 kilometers wide, so a huge, huge city. There are many, of course, Irish sites for the city of Atlantis. If the city of Atlantis was in Ireland, then it was in the Boyne Valley, which was the most likely location. That's the location of Newgrange, which is the circular temple Plato described, and there are hundreds of circular structures in the region, probably thousands actually. The Hill of Tara, which was the site of the High King of Ireland, is also a possibility. And yet another possibility is Rathcrogan in County Roscommon, which is pictured here in the top image. This was the ancient royal site and fort of Queen Maeve, Ireland's warrior queen, and is an area surrounded by legend. There are several other possible locations for the city in Ireland, including Cork, including Dundalk, including Galway. There are many, many possible locations. But we don't think the city of Atlantis that Plato described was in Ireland. Let's use an analogy. Today there are 36 million Irish Americans. That's 6 times the population of Ireland. America's great cities have millions of Irish residents and are much bigger than Irish cities. For example, the city of Boston has the highest percentage of Irish Americans of any American city. Boston is an Irish city, but it's not in Ireland. And America is today what Africa was in the past. The city that Plato described had elephants, ivory, tusks, and a huge population, and massive quantities of gold. There is only one place on earth that matches that description: Africa. Atlas, who was the Greek bearer of the heavens, was a key figure in Greek mythology. Many things were named after Atlas, including the Atlantic Ocean, which means Atlas's sea, the island of Atlantis, which means Atlas's island, the Atlas Mountains in northeast Africa, the Atlanteans, which means Atlas's people, and the Atlantes, which means Atlas's descendants. Greek mythology tells us that Atlas was the first king of the island of Atlantis, and it also tells us that Atlas was the first king of Mauritania in Africa. In most versions of Greek mythology, Atlas was the son of the Titan Hippotas. However, there are discrepancies. Plato wrote that Atlas was the son of Poseidon, who is the Greek god of the sea, and a mortal woman named Cleito. The later works of both Eusebius and Diodorus tell us that Atlas's father was actually Uranus, who was the sky god, and his mother was Gaia, who is Mother Earth, and that his grandfather was Ilium, king of Phoenicia. Ilium is derived from the Hebrew word Elion, meaning the supreme god El, or the Most High.
Phoenicia is just another name for Ireland, the Phoenician island.
The advanced Irish people became the gods in the mythology of the Greeks, Egyptians, Babylonians, and several other races. Zeus, the king of the Greek gods, and Maia, who was a daughter of Atlas, had a child called Hermes, the Greek messenger god, who was an extremely important figure in Greek mythology. Hermes was also referred to as an Atlantes or an Atlantean due to being a descendant of Atlas and therefore Atlantis. In the mythology of ancient Greece, cairns were associated with Hermes. Hermes was the equivalent of the Roman god Mercury and the Egyptian god Thoth, one of the founders of the Egyptian civilization and the Egyptian god of wisdom, writing, magic, and the moon. The mystical emerald tablets are associated with both Hermes and Thoth. The emerald tablets of Atlantis, the Emerald Isle. The city of Cairn is Plato's lost city of Atlantis. The city of Atlantis that Plato described was an ancient Irish settlement in Mauritania called Cairn, sometimes spelt Cairn with a K. The word cairn is derived from the Irish word cairn, which means pile of rocks or stacked rocks. Cairn was located at the base of Mount Atlas in Mauritania, Africa, in a structure called the Ricard structure or the Eye of the Sahara. If you look at the top image, that's the Ricard structure today. The bottom image is the artist's impression of Atlantis. It's got concentric circles, and at one time that was land and water. Diodorus, the Greek father of history, tells us that the Atlanteans lived at the base of Mount Atlas in Africa, and that this tribe was more advanced and technologically developed than the surrounding tribes of the area. He also tells us that Marina, queen of the Amazons, first attacked the Atlanteans in the city of Cairn. This city is also described as being an island or an island city. Greek historian Polybius also placed Cairn in Mauritania near Mount Atlas. There have been several towns and islands called Cairn in ancient Greek writings. We also find reference to an island of Cairn, which is 12 days' sail from the Pillars of Heracles. This is clearly a reference to the island of Ireland. It also adds that parts beyond the Isle of Cairn are no longer navigable because of shoals, mud and seaweed, much like Plato's description of Atlantis after the Great Flood. And again we note that the Greeks used the same word to describe two separate places. The island of Cairn, 12 days sail from the Pillars of Heracles, and the city of Cairn near the Atlas Mountains. Similarly, the island of Atlantis and the city of Atlantis. So the city of Cairn in Mauritania, Africa, is what remains of the ancient city of Atlantis. In Homer's Odyssey, which was written about 200 years before Plato's legend of Atlantis, Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes, was responding to the supreme god, and he said, "I am minded to smite the beautiful ship of the Phaeacians and to hide their city behind a huge encircling mountain." After the loss of their ship, the Phaeacians were terrified and said, "Let us sacrifice to Poseidon 12 choice bulls, in hope that he may take pity and not hide our city behind a huge encircling mountain." Homer used the term encircling mountain twice to describe the location of the city of the Phaeacians, Atlantis. The Eye of the Sahara, the Ricard structure, is encircled by the Atlas Mountains. If we look at these two images, here is the Ricard structure, 3 concentric circles. At one time this was a lake, this would have had a lot of water, and we can see the mountains completely encircling the city. This other image also shows the mountains completely encircling the city, 3 concentric circles of land and water, and remember at one time this was abundant with water. This was a very fertile land. We will show you the evidence for that in a second. Greek historian Diodorus tells us that the Atlanteans lived at the base of Mount Atlas in Africa, and that this tribe was more advanced and developed than the surrounding tribes of the area. He also tells us that it was actually an island in the nearby lake of Tritonus that disappeared during an earthquake, and that this island was inhabited by the Amazons, who were a ferocious warlike race of female warriors. Greek history is consistent in supporting the accounts of Diodorus, but not that of Plato, that it was the warlike Amazons and not the Atlanteans that attacked Greece and waged war in the region. This is an artist's impression of the Greek knowledge of the world at that time. A couple of things to point out. Here's Mount Atlas, Mauritania. Here's the Atlantis people. Nowhere can we find the island of Ireland or Britain for that matter. The Greeks at that time had no idea where it was. Hence Atlantis. The following is descriptions from Greek mythology about the Atlanteans and the Amazons. This is what the Greeks had to say about the Atlanteans. Now, the Atlanteans, dwelling as they do in the regions on the edge of the ocean and inhabiting a fertile territory, are reputed to excel their neighbours in reverence towards the gods and the humanity they showed in their dealings with strangers. And the gods, they say, were born among them. Atlas received as his part of the regions on the coast of the ocean, and he not only gave the name of Atlanteans to his people, but likewise called the greatest mountain in the land Atlas. They also say that he perfected the science of astrology and was the first to publish to mankind the doctrine of the sphere. This is the account given in their myth. So this is the Greek Diodorus describing what the Atlanteans told him. Their first king was Uranus, and he gathered the human beings who dwelt in scattered habitations within the shelter of a walled city and caused his subjects to cease from their lawless ways and their bestial manner of living, discovering for them the uses of cultivated fruits, how to store them, and not a few other things which are of benefit to man. He also subdued the larger part of the inhabited earth, in particular the regions to the west and the north. And since he was a careful observer of the stars, he foretold many things which would take place throughout the world. And for the common people, he introduced the year on the basis of the movements of the sun and the months based on the moon, and instructed them in the seasons which recur year after year. Near the salt is a mountain called Atlas, very taper and round, so lofty, moreover, that the top, it is said, cannot be seen, the clouds never leaving it, summer or winter. The natives call this mountain the Pillar of Heaven, and they themselves take their name from it, being called the Atlantes. They are reported not to eat any living thing and never to have any dreams. The whole of this country has successfully had the names of Etheria, Atlantia, and last of all, Ethiopia. So these are the exact writings of the Greeks in relation to the Atlantean people who lived in a settlement in North Africa. Let's now examine what the Greeks had to say about the Atlantean neighbours, the Amazons. The Greeks tell us that the Amazons were afflicted by an urge to attack the greater part of the inhabited world. The first people against whom they advanced, according to the tale, were the Atlanteans, the most civilised men among the inhabitants of those regions who dwelt in a prosperous country and possessed great cities. Marina, their queen, first attacked the Atlanteans in the city of Cairn, and when she took the city, she killed all the adult males, enslaved the women and children, and razed the city, or destroyed the city. But when the terrible fate of the inhabitants of Cairn became known among their fellow tribesmen, it is told that the Atlanteans, struck with terror, surrendered their cities and announced that they would do whatever should be commanded them, and that the Queen Marina, bearing herself honourably towards the Atlanteans, both established friendship with them and founded a city to bear her name in place of the city which had been razed. Marina then attacked the Gorgons, another race of warlike women. From there, Marina and the Amazons moved east to Egypt, where they befriended Horus, and then began conquering the Arabians, Syrians, and other peoples of the eastern Mediterranean. Marina waged war against the Arabs and killed many of them. She conquered Syria and waged war on the tribes around the Taurus too. The Greek historian Priam described the Amazons in battle as ferocious warriors who were the equal of men. Greek historians tell us that the Amazons are said to have dwelt on the western shores of Libya at the extremity of the habitable earth. They are said to have inhabited an island near the marsh Tritondes. This marsh is near the ocean which surrounds the earth, that's the Atlantic, and it receives its name from the river named Triton, which flows into it. It is adjacent to Ethiopia, under the greatest mountain in those regions, which is the Atlas Mountains. This mountain stretches to the ocean and is named by the Grecians as Atlas. The island is said to be very large and abounding with a variety of fruit trees which supply the inhabitants with food. The Amazons had an army of 30,000 women, foot soldiers, and 3,000 cavalry. They wore large snake skins, for Libya and North Africa contained snakes of enormous size. They carried swords and lances, which are spears. The Amazons attacked Athens, penetrating right to the sacred hill, the Acropolis. There the battle reached an awful pitch, with Antipode dying, still captive, and many other Amazons losing their lives in the heroic, futile effort. The defeated women retreated. Now, Antipode was an Amazon princess who was kidnapped by the Greeks. So here we have clear evidence from the Greeks themselves that it was the Amazons and not the Atlantean Irish that waged war in the region and that attacked Greece. We are told by the Greeks that having subdued many of the neighbouring Libyans and Numidians, the Amazons built a city in the lake Tritonus itself. This was an island city, and it's said that an earthquake opened up the parts towards the ocean and the marsh Tritonus was swallowed up. That's the same earthquake caused by a comet impact that sunk Atlantis Ireland in a tsunami and caused a huge global devastation, which we're about to learn about. The Greeks also mentioned the Gorgons, so let's quickly touch on those. Marina then attacked the Gorgons, another nation of warlike women. But when the Gorgons drew up their forces to resist them, a mighty battle took place in which the Amazons, gaining the upper hand, slew great numbers of the Gorgons and took no fewer than 3,000 prisoners. And since the rest had fled for refuge into a certain wooden region, Marina set fire to the wood, being eager to destroy the race entirely. But when she found that she was unable to succeed in her attempt, she retired to the borders of her country. So the Gorgons were an African tribe of women. So there was a lot of warlike women in these times. Medusa is the most famous of the Gorgons, and Medusa's legendary hair of snakes was really African dreadlocks like this lady in the image. Marina accorded a funeral to her fallen comrades on 3 pyres and raised up 3 heaps of earth as tombs, which are called Amazon mounds. So here we have mound building going on in Africa, just as it occurred all across America and originated in ancient Ireland. But the Gorgons, growing strong again in later times, were subdued a second time by Perseus, who was the son of Zeus, when Medusa was queen over them. And in the end, both the Gorgons and the Amazons were entirely destroyed by Hercules. According to the Greeks, there have been in Libya a number of races of women who were warlike and greatly admired for their manly vigour. Greek tradition tells us of the race of the Gorgons against whom Perseus made war. The Gorgons were a race distinguished for their valour, for the fact that it was the son of Zeus, the mightiest Greek of his day, who accomplished the campaign against these women, and that it was his greatest labour may be taken as proof of both the superiority and power of these female warriors. The Amazons attacked Greece and waged war in the region. It wasn't the Atlantean Irish. And Greek history is very consistent on that. Plato was wrong. He said that the Atlanteans waged war in the region. He was wrong. It was the Amazons. There are a handful of legends connecting ancient Ireland to Mauritania. In one legend, Phineas Farsted and his son Neil, who was married to Scota, a daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh, travelled from Egypt to Mauritania and then on to the Pillars of Hercules before sailing to Spain.
At one time, Mauritania was a rich and fertile land with hundreds of lakes and rivers during what is commonly called the African humid period, when Africa had lots of rainfall.
Radar images of the Mauritanian desert have revealed a vast river network stretching for more than 500 kilometres that form part of the Tamaracid River, which flowed across the parts of Western Sahara in ancient times from sources in the southern Atlas Mountains. This river carried water to the sea, and water may have last coursed through the channels as recently as 5,000 years ago. People, plants and wildlife would have once thrived in an area that is now desert. Within a few thousand years, the Sahara went from being a rich, fertile land to a barren desert.
The Younger Dryas period affected the global climate and reduced rainfall in Africa. The African humid period ended around this time, and the region has gradually got drier and drier.
The city of Cairn, the Eye of the Sahara, or also known as the Rickard structure, was at one time connected to the sea via a river and surrounded by fresh water. The indigenous people of this region are called the Berbers and are of Irish descent. Red hair and blue-eyed genetics are found in this region. Now, if we take a look at these two maps, this top map, this is the location of the city of Cairn, the city of Atlantis, you can see a huge river at one time ran through it. These green dots represent large lakes. As you can see, the ancient city of Cairn was right in the centre of a very moist, fertile, wet region with several lakes, and we also had large rivers. And if you actually take a look at all these rivers that crossed Africa, Africa at one time was a very fertile, humid, rich agricultural area, and the perfect place for the ancient Irish settlement of Cairn. Also, Cairn was connected to the sea by river, so it would have been relatively straightforward for the Irish to sail down up the river into the city. This wider region in Africa is known to the Berber people as the Tuat or Toat, which comes from the Irish word Tuatha, which means tribe. At one time, this part of Africa was very fertile, and there remain several watering holes along a 160-kilometre stretch. These watering holes are still used today by African tribes crossing the desert. All along the Tuat are Sarj, which is the Berber term for fortress or fortified village. This part of Africa has been known as the Ivory Coast and the Gold Coast throughout history, and it was well known to the Phoenician Irish. This is the Ivory Coast here, this is the Gold Coast. These four areas are large gold fields, large gold mines. Much of the Stone Age cave art found in this area depicts horses and chariots. So the people in this area were fascinated by horses and chariots because when the ancient Irish brought them, it was super advanced technology in their eyes, and they considered the ancient Irish godlike because they were just more developed. This area has several gold fields and is one of the most gold-rich areas on the planet. The Phoenician Irish are heavily connected with the legendary King Solomon. It was the Phoenician builders who constructed his temple, and he also used their merchant ships. The gold fields of the Tuat region are probably the location of King Solomon's legendary lost gold mines. We suspect this is where King Solomon's legendary gold mines was, right here. These were also probably the sources, but more than likely these ones. It's closer to the coast and would have been easier to sail around. This is the location of the city of Cairn, which was connected to the sea by river, and they could sail round and collect their gold and then sail all back round and take it over to Solomon or wherever they wanted to take it.
Solomon is also pronounced Suleiman. Solomon was considered to be the wisest man who ever lived and is a key figure in several of the world's religions. He features in the Quran, the Bible, and the Jewish Torah.
The Tuat region is an area in the middle of the Sahara which today contains 750,000 date palms in an area of 45 square kilometres. These trees provide edible sweet fruit. Right in the middle of the Sahara we find 750,000 date palms. What's most incredible is that these trees are nourished by an ancient man-made irrigation system dating back thousands of years. Thousands of such irrigation systems, which provide water to the driest regions, have been found all over the world. These systems are known in the Berber region as fogaras and in the Arab region as qanats. This technology originated in ancient Ireland where they were called holy wells, and thousands of similar irrigation tunnels are found all over the world. If we just look at this image, these are old irrigation tunnels that were built in ancient times. Obviously this area is now a desert, but at one time this was very fertile. And this is how they did it. They found underwater rivers and they built channels and access shaft, and the water sprung up. So these people were highly advanced, and they really understood the laws of nature, the laws of water, the laws of magnetism. One of the greatest gifts humanity could give to the modern world is irrigation. A third of the world's landmass is desert, and a lot more of it is dusty ground that is really difficult to grow things on. One of the main causes of poverty and starvation on Earth is a lack of irrigation. I think there's a responsibility on all of us to provide a better future for all of humanity and for generations not yet born.
We just also like to make a point here. The current form of money on the planet needs to evolve. Money is needed for economies and for trade and commerce, but the type of money that's currently used needs improvement. It was invented decades ago when the world was a very different place. We suggest the time dollars model, and there has been several great books written about that, combined with an education-backed currency where people are paid to learn. That way, people who live in poverty have a source of income and dignity. They're able to provide for their families and build communities, and at the same time, because their skills are evolving, they become more productive and valuable members of the community and are able to contribute to the global economy. Money is not real. It's a creation that humans have invented to facilitate commerce. Money is needed, but a better form of money is needed. Money is a form of measurement, and saying that humanity could run out of money is as ignorant as saying we could run out of inches. We just need to invent a better form of money that works for all of humanity. Is it only when the last river has been poisoned and the last fish has died that man will realise you can't eat money? We have to take care of this planet. It's the only place we have to live.
The Atlas Mountains are a huge mountain range running along North Africa. They are primarily inhabited by the Berber populations. The Berbers are the descendants of the ancient Irish and of occasional redheads. Red hair frequency is especially significant among the Rifians from Morocco and the Kabyles from Algeria, while even the Queen of Morocco today has red hair. During the Great Flood, at the end of the Younger Dryas period, some Atlanteans escaped to the mountains and built settlements. If you look at the bottom picture here, that's one of the remaining settlements. These settlements contain agricultural terraces which are virtually identical to the terraces found in the Andes. Fruits and nuts are grown in the region, and there are some rare native species of plants. Wheat and barley is also grown in the region, which may be the same native strain first introduced thousands of years ago. These terraces may well be the inspiration for the Hanging Gardens of Babylon legend. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon have never been found. Babylon was in Iraq, but it's possible the legend of the Hanging Gardens was based on these terraces. They look like hanging gardens, so it's possible. Perhaps this was old Babylon and new Babylon was built in the Middle East. Of course, this is just a suggestion. We offer absolutely no proof. We're just pointing this out because they look like hanging gardens. And since the Hanging Gardens of Babylon have never been found, we think there is some connection, although what it is, we're not sure. So finally, let's look at the drowning of Atlantis, which was caused by a cosmic impact. The word disaster comes from Greek and means bad or evil star. Cosmic impacts, that is a comet, an asteroid or a meteorite striking the Earth, are a lot more common than we realise. A comet has a much denser mass than an asteroid or meteorite and is capable of enormous destruction. Due to the extreme heats and pressures associated with comets, they contain platinum and diamonds. A comet strike is a mass extinction event. So what we're getting at here is comets are very different to asteroids and meteorites. Meteorites are usually small scale. A meteorite hits Earth every week, not really a big deal. Asteroids have the potential to do a lot of damage, but asteroids are slow moving space rocks that only get their momentum when they come into Earth's atmosphere and they get burnt up by the atmosphere. They can still do plenty of damage, but the comets is the one that are the big concern. Because of the extreme heat and pressure associated with comets, you find platinum and diamonds. Anywhere you find nano diamonds or platinum dust, it's a big indication of a comet. A large comet struck the Atlantic Ocean around 11,600 years ago. This huge impact caused a global flood and epic rainfalls. A tsunami caused by the comet or caused by follow-on earthquakes drowned Atlantis Ireland. Very few survived. Large parts of the world were affected by this comet impact. Before we examine this specific event, let's first quickly look at some more recent impacts, which are a lot more common than most people realise. Comet impacts is not science fiction, it's science fact. We're going to look very, very quickly at 3 relatively recent incidents. In 1908, an asteroid burned up in the skies over the remote region of Tunguska in Siberia, Russia. The Tunguska event released 185 times more energy than the Hiroshima atomic bomb and flattened 80 million trees like matchsticks over 2,000 square kilometres. Had it hit a city, the city would have simply ceased to exist. Irish scientists studying oak tree rings have been able to determine 2 catastrophic environmental events, one in 536 AD and the other around 2350 BC. In both periods, the growth of the oak tree rings was severely stunted. So what these scientists did was they looked at the growth of a tree ring for many thousands of years, and what they discovered was there was 2 extreme events that affected Ireland in the last 3,000 years. What they also discovered is these events affected the entire world. Now, if we look at these 2 graphics, the top image is the crater in Mexico that is thought to have killed the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were around for millions and millions and millions of years, and they were wiped out with a comet impact. We are on Earth a tiny fraction of the time, and we are extremely exposed to a comet impact. The bottom image is several discovered craters all around the world. That image has not actually been updated. There are a few more that need to be added to it. But here's the thing I want you to realise. There's not a single crater in the ocean. Craters in the ocean aren't discovered. Craters on land are easy to find. Craters in the ocean are not. The comet that sunk Atlantis Ireland 11,600 years ago hit the ocean. And you're about to learn exactly where it hit. A comet impact would look something like this. And the problem with the comet is it comes out of the blue very, very quickly. So 536 AD has been described as the worst year to be alive. The extreme weather event of 536 was the most severe short-term episode of global cooling in the last 2,000 years. This event lasted for 10 years, causing extreme hardship and suffering all across the world. A mysterious fog plunged Europe, the Middle East and parts of Asia into darkness day and night. Syrian records tell us that the sun was dark and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for only 4 hours, and still this light was only a feeble shadow. According to the ancient Irish annals, there was a failure of crops or a failure of bread in the year 536. Based on similar studies in Scandinavia and America, we now know that this event had a global impact with very little sunlight, abnormally low temperatures, crop failures and drought. Shortly afterwards, in 541 AD, the bubonic plague struck, killing millions. The most likely cause of this event was a small comet that disintegrated in Earth's atmosphere, causing a huge dust cloud that blocked the sun's life-giving rays. Very similar to the top image on this screen. The sun just would have been blocked out, very little getting through. And at the bottom, you just see crop failures like that all over the world. Crops failed for several years in a row, and millions died from the Justinian plague. The bubonic plague was also called the Justinian plague. By the way, Ireland was ravished by the Justinian plague, and by the time the Vikings arrived in Ireland around 900 AD, the population was almost completely wiped out. The dust veil created by this event would have caused widespread starvation, disease, hardship and suffering. Scientists have calculated that this global event was triggered by a small comet. If such crop failures happened today, most of the world's population would face starvation and extreme suffering. In 2350 BC, an event known to science as the 4.2 kiloyear event, or the Middle East anomaly, occurred. This extreme event lasted for at least a century and was the most severe climate change event in the last 10,000 years. This was a huge natural disaster caused by a comet impact in the al-Bini lake in southern Iraq. This event completely destroyed the city of Akkad, which was the capital of the Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia. In the immediate aftermath of the impact, there were wildfires, floods, and a huge air blast of over 100 megatons of power. That's the equivalent of 6,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. 6,000 of them. Global agriculture experienced mega droughts, rapid cooling, and crop failures. Great civilizations all around the world collapsed into anarchy and social chaos. Famine and widespread abandonment of agricultural land was common. The civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, Crete, China, and Latin America were all heavily affected. All that remained of the great city of Akkad was a huge crater in the ground and a giant dust plume soaring over Mesopotamia. It's very likely that this event caused the Neolithic plague, which killed millions. Plagues usually follow comet impacts. The Great Chinese Flood of Gunyut also occurred around that time, as did a period of extreme droughts. A period of intense drought at the time is recorded across North Africa, the Middle East, the Red Sea, the Arabian Peninsula, the Indian subcontinent, and mid-continental America. Glaciers throughout the mountain range of Western Canada advanced around this time. The life-giving waters of the Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile rivers were decimated. The fertile lands of the Middle East and Africa started to turn to dust. This region is still very dry today. Evidence of this apocalyptic climatic event has been found on all 7 continents. If you look to the images on the right, the top one is just a comet striking Earth. By the way, in ancient mythology, a comet was known as a dragon, a red dragon, or a fiery serpent. In the bottom image, these are all the places in the world that so far have been proven to have been heavily affected by this comet impact. The entire world was affected, but these are the places that have already done the research. So there is absolutely no doubt that there was a major climate event at 2350 BC. We're going to have to wait for the science to catch up on this one. It hasn't yet been accepted that that's where the comet struck in southern Iraq, but it's only a matter of time. It absolutely struck there. The same scientists who found the crater in Iraq also found the following eyewitness accounts on old Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets. The first one is from a cuneiform tablet from Mesopotamia. The monster grew in length for 15 days. So the monster is the comet, and the people could see it for 15 days before it hit. So it obviously circled around Earth for a while before striking. The rock monster in the sky was ordered to wipe out the beloved town of Kumaya, which was the city of Akkad. Enki, who was the Mesopotamian god, according to this tablet, blocked the water of the Tigris and Euphrates. Its riverbed was empty, no water flowed. Storm of heaven, the malicious storm which swept over the land, which destroyed cities, made that storm like rain pouring down from heaven never recur. The storm was over the following day, with the city reduced to ruined mounds. Corpses were piled, possessions were scattered about. The entire agricultural irrigation system, the channels and the levees, which were dug and constructed over centuries worth of work by foregoing ancestors, disappeared. Gone were the orchards and the cultivated land. The riverbed was dry, filled with dust mud. To obtain drinking water, people dug foxholes because in the riverbed no flowing water is carried. Now here is a second account found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, also from Mesopotamia. And the 7 judges of hell, the Anunnaki, who are known as the gods, raised their torches, lighting the land with their livid flames. Despair went to heaven when the god of the storm turned daylight into darkness, when he smashed the land like a cup. One whole day the tempest raged, gathering fury as it went. It poured over the people. Mud pebbles rained down from above, A man could not see his brother, nor the people be seen from heaven. People tried to avoid being buried under collapsing roofs, leaving their houses, trying to get to higher ground. Even the gods were terrified of this flood, and they fled to the highest heaven. Now, these are two eyewitness accounts. There are others which were written, almost 4,500 years ago. And that was how they interpreted the events at the time. They interpreted them that the thunder god or the sky god was punishing the people, and it sent a red dragon or a rock monster, or sometimes in mythology it's called a thunderbolt. So these are relatively recent events in human history that had a huge impact on humanity. And humanity today, if a similar event happened, would undergo extraordinary suffering. We as a species need to be aware of the damage that comets can cause, the frequency with which they occur, and to create adequate defences. And the most adequate defence of all would be some form of force field, probably using the magnetosphere that already surrounds the Earth. Plato gave us a very specific timeline for the drowning of Atlantis, 11,600 years ago. This date perfectly coincides with the end of the Younger Dryas period, which is also known as the Mini Ice Age, which lasted from circa 12,800 to 11,600 years ago. Based on our own research, we estimate a start date of 12,960 before present, a duration of 1,360 years, and an end of 11,600 years before present. The Younger Dryas was the most unusual cooling event in 2 million years. Temperatures plunged 10 degrees and stayed low for about 1,400 years. I'm going to repeat that. The Younger Dryas period was the most unusual cooling event in 2 million years. Temperatures plunged and stayed low for about 1,400 years. There was a mass extinction of large animals which were called megafauna. Tens of millions of large animals went extinct within a very short time. Things like mammoths, Irish elks, and saber-toothed tigers all disappeared. There has been many mammoths found that were frozen alive. They had buttercups in their mouth and food in their stomach. They were just frozen instantly. That's how quick this thing happened. The American Clovis culture was devastated by the sudden change in temperature, while globally, human population levels plunged by 30 to 60%. At least half the people on Earth were wiped out by the start of the Younger Dryas, and the rest of them were wiped out by the end of it. The Atlantic Gulf Stream, which laps Ireland with warm Atlantic water, did not stop during this period. It did cool, but it did not stop. And while temperatures were more extreme than today, Ireland remained habitated by animals and humans. Animal DNA records prove this, as does a recent bare bone find, which proves Ireland was habitated at the time. And as I mentioned earlier, Ireland had 3 separate finds of flint tools dated from 300 to 400,000 BC and is most likely inhabited since then. The biggest problem with the comet impact theory is that a suitable crater has not yet been found. This is actually not all that surprising, since only 19% of Earth's surface is actually land. 10% is ice, so it's under the ice, and 71% is sea. So what we've decided to do is to create an estimate based on what we do know. And what we know for sure is that in the last 50,000 years, the 19% of Earth's land had 3 huge impacts. One in Mauritania 21,000 years ago, one in Arizona, and one in China, both around 50,000 years ago. So we've used some simple mathematics here. Since 19% of the Earth's surface contains 3 giant craters that have been verified from the last 50,000 years, we can estimate the sea and the ice impacts. And there's the maths there. 19% was 3 impacts. 10% of the ice territory is 1.57, so that's been rounded to 2 ice impacts. Sea is 11.2, that's 11 sea impacts, giving us a total of 16 giant Earth impacts in the last 50,000 years. The point of this graphic is to show that the Earth gets hit with giant comets a lot more often than we realise, and those numbers suggest once every 3 and a bit thousand years. By the way, the two events that we've just outlined, the 2350 BC and the 536 AD events, were not giant impacts. They were just large. As a species, we are very exposed to comet impacts of all sizes, and the risks don't reduce just because we ignore them. Let's find the comet that sunk Atlantis and caused the Great Flood. As we can see from that clip, a giant comet striking the ocean would cause a huge tsunami. And that's what drowned Atlantis Ireland and caused the Great Flood. So where did this happen? There were two impacts, one that started the Younger Dryas period and one that ended it. The first occurred here at point 1 in Greenland, around 12,800 years ago. This caused a massive melting of ice and is called Meltwater 1A by scientists. It cooled the oceans and it triggered the mini ice age period. Put simply, this event froze the ocean. The second comet was the opposite. It occurred 11,600 years ago and it struck right here at the Puerto Rico Trench in the Atlantic Ocean. This comet caused a massive melting of ice called Meltwater 1B. It heated the oceans and it ended the mini ice age period. Put simply, this event boiled the ocean. So the first one cooled and froze the ocean. The second one boiled the ocean. This place here is called Hiawatha in Greenland. This place here is called the Puerto Rico Trench in the Atlantic Ocean. This first impact would have cooled the oceans and it also would have created a huge dust cloud that blocked the sun. This second impact would have warmed the oceans and it would have caused that much rain and cloud cover that it would have destroyed the dust cloud that blocked the sun. So let's examine these both in detail. So here's our sea currents. The first one occurred here. Lots and lots of ice melted instantly straight into the Atlantic Ocean, which messed up the ocean currents massively, and essentially the warm water cooled. After the initial upheaval settled down, this continued to work, but it was nowhere near as warm as it was, hence the mini ice age. The second comet struck here and boiled the ocean. It resulted in a huge amount of earthquakes, volcanoes, and it heated the ocean, which resulted in a rapid warming of global climates. The ice impact. This is a graphic representation of the crater that has been found in Greenland. It's 31 kilometers across, so it's an absolutely huge crater. The first event that caused the mini ice age was an ice impact in Hiawatha, Greenland, around 12,800 years ago. This event melted a lot of ice, which cooled the oceans, slowed the Atlantic Gulf Stream, and created a huge dust cloud that blocked the sun. Evidence has been piling up to indicate a huge comet strike or a series of strikes that occurred around 12,800 years ago, including ancient stone carvings from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which indicate a devastating comet struck the Earth at 11,970 years ago. Ice core data from Greenland pinpoints the events to 12,910 years ago. Nanodiamonds and platinum dust, which are only formed by comets, have so far been found in 10 countries and dated to 12,900 years ago. Research indicates a massive 10% of the Earth's land surface was consumed by fire around 12,800 years ago. Hell on Earth. Pollen grains indicate a drop in temperature around this period, while there was also a large-scale extinction of animals, the megafauna, around 12,800 years ago. One other possible location for an ice crater is the Wilkes Land Gravity Anomaly in Antarctica. Here we find a huge gravitational anomaly and a suspected 300-kilometer wide crater. That's 10 times bigger than the Greenland crater. We don't think this is the crater, however, that caused the Younger Dryas because it's much too large. If an impact of that size happened today, humanity would face mass extinction, as would most life on the planet. That crater probably happened much, much earlier. There's also, by the way, a crater at the bottom of the moon, which has a strange gravitational anomaly. Wherever you find a gravitational anomaly, you often find that's where a comet struck. So the easiest way to find where a comet struck is to look for gravitational anomalies. Of course, that doesn't mean if you find a gravitational anomaly, it was a comet, but it's a great place to start. So let's find the second comet. And we find it here in the Puerto Rico Trench. So if we take a look at this image, the Puerto Rico Trench, there are two plates beside other, the American and the Caribbean. Here's the islands of Puerto Rico, and here we've got the Puerto Rico Trench, which is the deepest trench in the entire Atlantic Ocean. As we've just discussed, gravitational anomalies often indicate large impact craters, and the Puerto Rico Trench has the most negative gravitational anomaly on Earth. According to NASA, there is a mass beneath this trench that is so dense its gravitational pull causes the oceans to dip, and it also affects navigational instruments. This location is in the infamous Bermuda Triangle and contains the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, which is called the Milwaukee Depth. As this site is so close to the tectonic plate boundaries, a comet impact here would trigger global earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis. As the oceans boiled, huge quantities of steam would have reached the atmosphere, causing torrential rains lasting for months. Volcanoes would have erupted all over the world, while the tectonic plates would have shaken, causing numerous earthquakes. If a comet did indeed strike this region, the following events would be the origin of the Great Deluge legends, which are found all across the world in virtually every tradition.
This is a new theory, and we will have to wait for the science to catch up to either prove or disprove it. It was first discovered by a German rocket scientist called Otto Muck. We have done a lot of research and are certain this is the site, but time will tell.
This second comet struck right here, right where the extreme gravitational anomaly is. It is right on the edge of these plates, and it would have destabilized this plate and sent shockwaves all around the world. Huge tsunamis, floods, and because there was so much fire and volcano in the ocean, it would have caused a huge amount of clouds and rainfall and an epic deluge all across the earth. These are the plate boundaries around the world, and they would have lit up like this. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, epic rainfall. It really would have been hell on earth. The comet struck here, in this region, right beside this plate and this one. Here's Ireland here, pretty close to the mid-Atlantic fault and pretty close to this point where 3 points meet. There's no question Ireland would have had a huge tsunami, as would most of the world. This would have been a truly cataclysmic event, hell on earth. According to Plato's legend, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. This clearly indicates a tsunami. Also, several times in his dialogue, Plato mentions the drowning of Atlantis. Atlantis Ireland was flooded by a tsunami 11,600 years ago, caused by a comet impact at the Puerto Rico Trench, the same impact that ended the Younger Dryas mini-ice age. Those that survived were on higher ground, and Ireland has several legends of life before the Great Flood, as well as people surviving the Great Flood. Ireland is located 1,500 kilometres from the mid-Atlantic ridge and 2,200 kilometres from the Azores, where 3 tectonic plates meet. A large earthquake anywhere along these boundaries could cause a tsunami that would flood Ireland. Seashells, fossils, and even whale bones have been found in the area surrounding the Eye of Sahara, or the city of Cairn, or the African city of Atlantis in Mauritania. This structure is 120 metres above sea level and 520 metres from the coast, indicating that at one time a large tsunami occurred here. Tests on the sand and gravel at the site indicate that the bulk was accumulated sometime between 15,000 and 8,000 years ago, in line with Plato's estimate of a huge event circa 11,600 years ago. Here we see volcanic ash and lava going into the sea and huge amounts of steam going into the air, which would have created epic amounts of rainfall and flooding. And we now move to the final slide of the presentation. We have decided, after a lot of deliberation, to include this slide. We don't need to include it to prove Atlantis, but we think it's important it is included. We will warn you that this is a very wild theory. We offer as much evidence as we have, although this is certainly a theory we will have to wait for the science to catch up on. If you like a good conspiracy theory, you're in for a treat. Plato started his legend of Atlantis with the tale of Phaeton, who was the son of the sun god Helios, and we suspect there is a connection. The tale states that Phaeton took his father's sun chariot across the sky without permission and crashed the sun into Earth, causing huge destruction. Phaeton is also one of the many names for the theoretical missing fifth planet between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Quite a lot of people think that there used to be a planet here that exploded, and that's why we get the asteroid belt here and also here on either side of Jupiter. Of course, that is not a mainstream opinion, but that is an opinion that has been around for hundreds of years, and some of the greatest astronomers of all time suspect that there was a planet there which most call Phaeton. Some mythologies call that planet Lucifer and Maldek. And if you read science fiction, there are about 100 different names for that planet, but the most accepted one is Phaeton. Now, it's possible that most of the comets and asteroids in our solar system were caused by the explosion of a missing fifth planet, the remains of which are the asteroid belt. And the extreme heat from this event would have created the platinum and nanodiamonds found in comets, and would also have provided the explosive energy needed for comets to fly around the solar system. We must remember that asteroids just float around doing nothing, they're space rocks, but comets fly around space at enormous speeds, so they need a source of energy to do that. And one theory is that they got this energy from the explosion of a fifth planet, the planet Phaeton. We suspect that there was indeed a fifth planet which was destroyed by a violent collision with one of Jupiter's moons. Many of Jupiter's moons move as fast as a comet but are millions of times larger. So these are Jupiter's moons, and they extend an extraordinary distance from Jupiter. We think one of Jupiter's former moons landed the knockout blow. The power of such an impact, coupled with Jupiter's enormous gravity, would have torn the fifth planet to pieces, creating thousands of comets and asteroids. Of course, this is just a wild theory, and only time will tell. We will all have to wait for the science to catch up. Either way, it's an interesting theory. There are a lot of wild conspiracy theories surrounding the missing fifth planet. Everything from humans used to inhabit it and self-destructed, to aliens inhabited, to it got struck by a comet, it got struck by another planet. There are many, many theories, and who knows what the truth is. We are of the opinion that it was struck by one of Jupiter's moons, and in a violent collision, coupled with Jupiter's gravity, was torn to pieces. If a fifth planet did indeed explode, we can use the orbits of known comets to calculate the date of this explosion, but more importantly, predict possible future comet impacts. The ability to predict and prevent future impacts is a key tool in developing adequate defences. As a species, developing a force field to prevent cosmic impacts must be a high priority. Billions of lives are at stake. The key to defending against a comet is time. If we knew that the Earth was about to be hit by a comet in 100 years' time, that gives us enough time to deal with it. If we've found out that it was going to be hit tomorrow, very little we can do. The reason we have included this is what we think happened. We think this is the source of all the comets, or most of the comets in the solar system. And if we understand the comets, we can better prepare for them and predict them. It's very possible we're wrong with this theory, only time will tell. There are over 1,000 facts in this presentation. It's unlikely that every single one of them is correct. Don't believe a word we say, do your own research and think for yourself. Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation, and we will finish off with a reminder of other opportunities to learn from Keystone University. There's 3 rules of the game at Keystone University. Number 1, don't believe a word we say, think for yourself. The point of an education is to help you do your own thinking. So please do your own research, do your own thinking, come to your own conclusions. Number 2, before you make up your mind, open it. We sincerely hope that we've opened your mind and expanded your mind during this presentation. And finally, you're going to have to wait for the mainstream to catch up with this and prove or disprove these theories. Our mission is to build the world's best university, a centre of excellence to push the human race forward. We want to build a university the like of which the world has never seen. If you're interested in learning from us, supporting our work, or finding out more, check out keystone.ie. We offer 3 seminars: Atlantis, Mastermind and Enterprise. Each one of them is exclusive material not available anywhere else in the world. They're all available once a year in Dublin, Ireland. The Atlantis seminar is all about exploring the great mysteries. On day 1 you learn about the ancient history of the world. Day 2 is all about modern science, the great breakthroughs and how science is turning science fiction into science fact. Day 3 is all about human evolution, where we come from, where we're going and why we're here. That programme is run every May. Our second programme is Mastermind, where we help you awaken the genius within. You will study the mind, you'll get to learn where stress, fear, anxiety, all these things come from. You will learn the mechanics of the mind, you will master creative thinking, and you will create an inspired mission for your life that sets your soul on fire. That programme is run every August in Dublin, Ireland, and like all our programmes, it lasts 3 days. Our final programme is called Enterprise, where you master the art of business. This is the best business education on the planet. If you want to build a great career in business, this is the place to be. Day 1 is all about rapid growth, sales, marketing, how to create a business master plan. Day 2 is all about financial mastery, how to multiply the sales, profit, cash flow and the value of any business. You'll also learn how to read a set of accounts and how to master the art of making money through business. Day 3 is all about people skills, recruitment, management, leadership, negotiations, how to inspire people, how to interview people, how to communicate, how to give feedback, all of these vitally important skills. Driving a business is like driving a car, and we all need a few lessons now and again. All our programs are exclusive to Keystone. This material is not available anywhere else in the world. We hope to see you in Atlantis Ireland soon.
And if you do come, why not stay a little longer and explore Atlantis Ireland? We will leave you with this final thought. We all have to climb out of the slime of ignorance. Whether as an individual, a country, or a species, we all need to climb out of the slime of ignorance towards a golden age, the age of wisdom, a world in union.
There's a tree